Welcome to the show. There we are. Okay, there sometimes might be sort of a delay in the camera versus what you're seeing. So I apologize for that, but it works out on the live stream. Go ahead and everybody give me something in the chat. Just give me sort of a hello to your neighbors. And heck, just unmute. Unmute and say something out loud. Let's make it hard to hear. Go for it. Everybody unmute and say something. There we go. People. It's people. Wow. There we go. Nope. Let me get that fixed. There we go. Yeah, here we go. Hope your first 24 hours was okay. There's not much time for you to have gotten anything done. But hopefully you got your class marker relink quiz completed. Here's the thing about the quizzes. You get 2 tries for all of them. You don't get the answers. So if you're confused about something, if you can't figure out why you got something wrong, let me know. I will help you. I will tell you why, but it's easier. It's better. It's better for retention if you have to struggle and actually think about it and think it through. But I don't want you to just be in there completely clueless and just lost. So the other thing about them, you get 2 tries, and then also this. You have to do them before you can take the final. School policy is you can't sit for the final exam unless you've completed the quizzes, as well as your allowable time, no more than missing your maximum 17 hours allowable time. So just keep that in mind. We will remind you along the way. And around a quarter through the time we have together, I'll say, hey, now's the time to do the quarter term exam. And then I'll say, hey, now's the time to do the midterm exam, all that sort of thing. Not too hard to figure out. Let's pick back up where we left off. We were finishing up on just sort of, hey, what can you expect from this process? Then we're going to get into license law and commission rule. North Carolina license law and commission rule, because again, that is crucial. Just the comment section alone, PDF, the 28-page PDF I showed you last night, that accounts for 10 of the questions out of the 40, a fourth of the state portion of the exam questions. So just be attentive to that. Do something in that every week, no matter what the chapters are that we're handling in class. Always go back to the comment section. And the commission also says this about it. Real Estate Commission says the comment section is not enough. There are some instructors that just preach comment section, just read it. But it actually does not have 10 items that are mentioned in the syllabus. Let me point those out to you. The syllabus, there we go. Here we are. And if we go down to the comment section, the section about license law commission rule, which is all the way toward the end, section 21, for some reason, I keep asking for them to bump it up further higher in the order, but maybe someday. I can still teach it in whatever order I want, so we will still be covering it early. Thank you. This might, there it is. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you. So this is section 21 of the syllabus. This is the real estate license law and commission rule. And if we make our way on down through, the stuff we're going to cover tonight out of this section is A. Pretty much everything in this section A, requirement for needing a license and what all these things mean, we're going to talk about. We're going to get this done, out of the way. How many sections in this are there? There's A, there's B, there's C, D, E, F, and G. So we're going to break it up into about 4 or 5 parts. Oh, there's also timeshares. 4 or 5 parts, and I'm going to touch on those, cover those in pieces along the way. Here's the one I want to call your attention to. If you look in subsection C, it says general licensing provisions. Talks about things like what is a provisional broker? What is that thing, petition for predetermination that I told you about last night? We'll go back over that. Expiration and renewal, I kind of told you a little bit about that. We have to pay $45 to renew the license by June 30th. All of these things, there's 10 of them in this subsection C. If you take the comment section PDF that I showed you last night and then add these 10 things out of letter C here, that is pretty much what you're going to be tested on for the state portion of the exam. So just reading the comment section is not enough. It needs to be the comment section plus this item, this section C from the syllabus. All the other stuff in this section 21, A through H, is in the comment section. The only thing that's not in the comment section is the letter C items, those 10 things, which again are what we're going to talk about tonight. And for some of you, it might take a minute to get your head around all of these various resources. What do I mean by the comment section? I'm just talking about this document we talked about last night. It's about 28 pages, 23 pages, something like that. And it's the easier to read version. Now, there is the actual real estate license law. There's also the real estate commission rules. Let me see if I can. Good. There it is. I did get it. I thought I sent, if I haven't, I will do that tonight, but I will add these PDFs to the Notion, and also I'll probably just email them to be safe. When you see anything starting with 58A, when you're reading the comment section, like, let me just show you. Here's a comment section. If we are reading through here and we see something listed that says a number reference like this, A104, that's a real estate commission rule. You'll go over to this PDF, 58A.0, what did it just say? It was .104. And here's where you find it. Here's the official real estate rules that it's referring to. And if you notice, in every real estate sales transaction, a broker representing a buyer shall at the initial contact, blah, blah, blah. I'm kind of falling asleep as I read this, right? It's kind of legalese, okay? So you still should read it and follow up in the license law PDF, but again, lead with the comments section. To dig deeper, so let's say you're reading and studying this section, disclosure of agency status. When do we have to tell people who we represent? That's what that means. You can't just fool people. If you run an ad, for instance, then you have a listing that somebody has hired you to help them sell. It would be much more of a productive ad if you could pretend you are the seller. If they think they're calling the seller, you're going to get a lot more calls because they don't want to deal with agents. But guess what? Against the rules. If we have a listing, we have to admit that we are the broker. So we can't run an ad and say, hey, call me at this phone number and talk about 123 ABC Street. That would be something that's called a blind ad, and it's illegal. It's not allowed. We would have to say, call me at this phone number about 123 ABC Street. I'm Neil Pender, the broker with so on and so forth firm. You with me? So that's what this is saying. There's lots of cases, pretty much anything we do when we're doing real estate. We have to be above board, upfront, and tell people who we represent. And there's a lot to be said for that. We're going to get a lot more into that when we talk about what was probably the most spoken word by me last night, agency. I mentioned agency a lot. Chapters 7 and 8 is all about agency because that is really the main point as to why we need the license, because we have a position of an agent in representing somebody. I like to think of Jerry Maguire, the movie Jerry Maguire, right? He's taken great care of his sports client, Cuba Gooding Jr., he's show me the money, right? He's taking good care of him. He's putting it all out there, just trying to do everything he can to take care of him, and even putting his client above himself. That's what we have to do. We are required to do that as part of having this license. So when you're studying this particular section here in the comments section, and it shows you an A104, go over here to the rules, look it up, and read the rule about it. And there it is. NCAC 58A 104. Here it is, all down through here. It's a couple of pages, but that's it. It's like 2.5 pages. The commission wants you to be familiar with the laws and rules. And if you're going through the comments section and you see a reference to 93A, you're going to know, oh, that means it's a law as opposed to a rule. The only reason I'm pointing that out to you is so you'll know which PDF to go look at. Right? Which one do you look at? Do you look at the one about the rules, which is 58A? Or do you go look at the one about the laws, which is 93A? So if we find a law reference like delivery of instruments, instruments meaning a legal document, like a contract, that's a legal instrument. That's under General Statute 93A-6A. It's also mentioned in the commission rule, so you can kind of look at both. So let's look at the law, the 93A-6A. We go over to the law PDF. There's 93A-1. Let's see. Keep on going. There's 3. There's 4. And there's 6.1. There we go. Disciplinary action by the commission. This is, in fact, a very important license law section to pay attention to because look what we have here. Disciplinary action by the commission. What can they do to us? And for what could they do it? In other words, what is it that we can do wrong that they're going to have a problem with? What do they not want us to do? What is it that's breaking the law? This 93A-6 says the commission has the power to discipline us. Here's an item for you to remember that will be testable. Out of everything the commission could do to us, 4 possible things, there's one thing they will never do to us. The commission will never fine a licensee. You get in trouble with the commission, they're not going to make you pay them any money as part of your discipline. You with me? So they love to ask that on all the practice exams I've seen. Which of the following things does the commission not do to a licensee? A, reprimand them. B, revoke the license. C, suspend the license. Or D, fine the licensee. The thing they don't do is fine you. Now, all good rules have exceptions, and there is one exception. So here's another testable question that you could write down. Which type of licensee could actually be fined by the Real Estate Commission? It turns out the Real Estate Commission has reserved one possibility. If you are a timeshare developer, someone who has your real estate license in order to develop timeshare projects. Anybody ever sat in on a timeshare sales pitch so that you could get the free place to stay for the weekend or the whatever thing they are offering? Was it fun? Maybe. If you're like, let me see how good they are at selling, they're probably really good at selling. Whether you just bought it or not, they're probably good at getting their point across real quick. So if you're watching it from that perspective, you might have learned something. But someone who has a timeshare development, the developer, if they do something that's not allowed, the Real Estate Commission could say, well, you didn't disclose something properly, therefore we're going to fine you $500 per violation. That's the other testable item. What's the one situation where the Real Estate Commission could fine a licensee? If it's a timeshare developer, they could be fined $500 per violation of the Timeshare Act. The thing that tells them what they have to do. They have to disclose certain things about the timeshare project so the buyers know what they're getting into. If they don't do that properly, they can be fined. And think about that, $500 per violation. What if they left something important out of like a general document they give to everybody? They did this for a year. How many violations could there be? a lot times 500, right? Could get pretty expensive. But that's the one time the commission would discipline us. When I say the word licensee, I'm talking about what you're going to be when you get your license, what I am. All brokers are licensees. We hold a license. That's all that means. Doesn't mean what kind of license. Are you provisional? Are you non-provisional? It's just that you have one. It also doesn't matter if you're inactive or active. You have a license of some sort. You're a licensee. So when you see that word, don't be confused by that. Let's look at the rest of this 93A-6, because it's a good one to pay attention to. It's probably a good one for you to cut and paste or print off the one page and look down through. The commission has power to take disciplinary action upon its own initiative. Here's how I would break this stuff down for if I were you studying to help you digest it better. Circle and underline the individual parts. Right, upon its own initiative, if it wants to, in other words. We're talking about the real estate commission. Or if somebody complains about you. Oh boy, what? You mean people actually complain about real estate agents? Well, that's where all that disciplinary stuff came from. Let me show you something. How hard is it to complain to the real estate commission? We go over to the Real Estate Commission website, ncrec.gov. There's the main page. We scroll down to the bottom. Boom. File a complaint. There's the complaint form. Everything you want to interact with the commission concerning involves an online form. If you want to fill in a complaint, you just put in your stuff. You talk about the person you're complaining about, the licensee themselves, if you know their number, their broker number, and various questions, and then all the details, 4,640 possible characters. If you need more space than that to complain, attach something. You can attach documents. Does anybody suspect some people might be mad at an agent and decide to complain, and it turns out the complaint is not valid? Maybe they're just ticked. Well, that's step one when the commission gets a complaint. Is it even valid and worthy of us following through? So the first thing they're going to do is say, does this person know the rules and laws, and are they complaining about something that is not actually a violation of the rules and laws? And then that's the rest of it, right? So that's how easy it is to talk about this stuff and to generate an inquiry. Let's look at the rest of this license law, 93A6. The commission may investigate the actions of any person or entity licensed. I'll talk to you about why I said entity. Licensed under this chapter, or any other person who shall assume to act in such capacity. That's the part I'm talking about that's like legal stuff. It's like blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we get it. A person or an entity, whatever. It might even be helpful if you print this out to strike through some stuff. And you're like, I know that all of this whole 2 sentences pretty much means if we're talking about a complaint. That might help you digest it. If the commission finds probable cause, now we're throwing legal terms around, that a licensee has violated something, they will hold or could hold a hearing on the allegations. So if, let's say the complaint has some merit. Somebody's complained about you and the commission says, yeah, they could have, that could be something. Let's look into it deeper. When that happens, they're gonna dig through. They're gonna need some more information by the parties, and when a complaint gets to that stage, they assign it to basically an investigator or someone who knows the laws and rules, and they're gonna send out a notification. Eventually, if you're the one who's being complained about and the commission needs more information from you, you'll receive an email from the Real Estate Commission called a letter of inquiry. It used to literally be a letter mailed, and it used to be mailed in a brown envelope. And so the old timers, you'll hear them refer sometimes, people in your office, when you get to that point, they'll say, the so-and-so got a big brown envelope. And you never want a big brown envelope from the commission because it says, hey, you are the subject of a complaint. We need to hear your side of the story. Reply to us. And this is the testable part. When you get a letter of inquiry, you have 14 days to tell them your side of the story and provide supporting documents that they ask for. I've been in sessions with the commission before training us educators, and they've told us this before. So by the way, this will never be your problem because you're going to do everything right. But those, you might meet some agents in your business where you're like, you're riding the line a little too close, and you might want to give them the friendly advice to just give the commission what they ask for, not more than. I've had commission members, employees of the real estate commission, say, whatever we ask for in the letter of inquiry, don't give us more than that. We're going to look at whatever you send. So they literally told us that. I'm sorry. I see a hand up. Do you still have a question, or did I miss that? Uh-huh. Yes. Absolutely. For sure. And I'm glad you do that. And I'm glad you mentioned that. That is a great point. Besides the comment section, I will be the order of our course and the topics is the order of the syllabus it's in. And that's a point of confusion, as you well know, probably why you ask, because the yellow book is not in the same order of the syllabus, right? Some of just a few, probably a half a dozen chapters don't quite line up. But that's why that study guide that I gave you, I don't think I have it on this PDF, has the comparison. So every time we're together, topic by topic, you can see, oh, this is going to be chapter, let's say, I think it's chapter 6. No, I can't remember. One of them is chapter 6 in the book is section 20 in the syllabus. So there's a few that are weird like that. So that's a good question. Then, what else do we have? The commission has a power to suspend or revoke. Those are 2 of the 4 things they could do to us. Suspension, suspend our license, revoke our license, reprimand us. Hey, you did it wrong, do better, slap on the hand. Or this other weird thing called a censure, censure. That's sort of like a reprimand, and I've heard through the grapevine that they're kind of doing away with that because you never hear of them ever doing that to people. They tend to either reprimand you, suspend you, or revoke in extreme cases. Revoke is obviously the worst. Basically, you can't do this anymore. So they can suspend or revoke at any time a license issued under the provisions of this chapter, or to reprimand or censure. There's the other 2. So you could circle these 4 as a reminder to yourself that these are the 4 things the commission will usually do in the event of a disciplinary situation. If, following a hearing, they adjudge the licensee to be guilty of what? So all of that paragraph of very legal-sounding language could pretty much be summed up to say this: the commission can discipline you with one of these 4 ways, and it might be the subject of an investigation of their own, or it might come from a complaint that anybody in the whole world could have issued and submitted to them. That's pretty much what all that says. And so in the comments section is probably going to sound more like what I just paraphrased than it is all of this stuff. That's why I want you to read that first. Then come over here and see what the fancy version sounds like. And then these are important. What is it? It's 15 things, items that are expanded upon in the comment section. These are 15 things that we are not allowed to do. That's what you're going to read about in the comment section and in more detail with actual examples. Because that's what the other thing I like about it. It says, hey, let me give you an example of where this could take place. This first one is huge. Oh man, it's a big topic, because willful or negligent misrepresentation versus willful or negligent omission. Those are 4 possibilities. Are you guilty of willful misrepresentation or negligent misrepresentation? Or were you guilty of willful omission or negligent omission? We're going to get more into that later tonight, but that is much bigger than that one little sentence. This is a level 3 item. This is a level 3 because on the test question, they're going to give you a paragraph to read of what broker A, or they might give them names, this broker did or said to the client, and or not said. Maybe they left something out they should have checked and they didn't. What are they guilty of? Willful misrepresentation, negligent misrepresentation, willful omission, or negligent omission. So we'll go through that together. False promises, basically a lie. Pursuing a course of misrepresentation or making false promises through agents, advertising, or otherwise. Keep in mind, sometimes you read one and you're like, "That why is 3 there at all?" Because it sounds a lot like 2. It's because somebody did something and they had to put a little extra nuance on the thing to cover themselves, right? So as we go down through, acting for more than one party without everybody knowing. You can't secretly be working for the other side without your side knowing. It's called undisclosed dual agency. We'll get more into that in, guess what? Chapter 7 about agency. Accepting a commission for the performance of any act specified from anybody except your own broker in charge. You can only be paid through that broker in charge you have. When you join a firm, you have a broker in charge that is in charge of all the brokers in the firm. That is who has to cut your check. Remember, you're 100% commission usually in this business. You can't just get a paycheck for maybe sending a referral to some agent down the road or across the state or across the country or world, really. You can, here's the most probably underappreciated benefit of having a real estate license. Receiving a referral fee because you connected a person who needs help in Alaska with a good Alaskan real estate agent or anywhere in the whole world. That agent, if they agree, will pay you a referral fee. It's going to be some percent of the portion that they end up with. I've paid people and I've received from people for referring business 20% of my part, 25%, even 30 or 35% sometimes. It's negotiable. There is no standard referral fee. Anytime, by the way, testable, anytime we're talking about the amount of money we could make or that we charge, we can never, ever, ever say that there is an industry standard commission. Has anybody read something, an article or Facebook thing, and someone acting like they know everything said, the standard commission rate is 6%? Anybody seen that, heard that? Don't do it ever, ever, ever from here forward. As an agent, we can't do that because it falls under something called the Sherman Antitrust Act. It implies that there's an industry standard and there's no choice for the consumer. The consumer has to pay it. That's what it implies, which is not true. But you and I both know, you probably have talked to a couple of agents. Who knows more than 5 real estate agents in your life? Probably all of you, right? You probably know some that are, and you don't even know that they are, but they have the license. They just have a real job that I like to call it a real job. One W-2 job you make, you 9 to 5 kind of a thing. But as a broker having a license, here's the most unappreciated part of that. The benefit of having a license is you could get paid and not do any work because you could just refer. If you meet somebody who needs help and you are in Raleigh, you don't know anything about Charlotte. And guess what? The multiple listing service that you subscribe to, that you use to find out what things are worth and how you list a property for sale, they are not statewide. It's not one giant North Carolina MLS. The MLS, the multiple listing service, is market dependent. There's several. There's many across the state. There's one for the greater Charlotte area. There's one for Raleigh, Cary area. There's one out there in Wilmington. There's, in fact, for some weird reason, though, side note, the Charlotte one partnered up, and we actually have some Asheville listings. You can list Asheville properties in the Charlotte MLS for some reason. I guess maybe because a lot of Charlotte people have mountain property, maybe. But for the most part, if you're in an area that's kind of straddles a line, or maybe you go back and forth a lot from Raleigh to the beach, and you want to work and be able to work in both, well, the real estate license that you're going to get from this class and after you take that PSI, that's going to cover you for the whole state of North Carolina, but it won't handle the MLSs. The Raleigh MLS is not the same as the one in Wilmington, for instance. So you would need to subscribe to both so you have access to both. Maybe you spend 4 months there and 8 months here, right? So if you're receiving a referral fee because you are in Raleigh and you referred somebody to Asheville, to some agent in Asheville, then their broker in charge would need to write the check for whatever that amount of money you agreed to is and send it to your broker in charge. And then your broker in charge would give it to you. You can't get paid directly from that Asheville broker in charge. You can only get it. And that used to be different if you were provisional versus non-provisional. Now it's the same for everybody. All brokers have to get paid routed through their BIC. Broker in charge, I'll often refer to brokers in charge as a BIC. So what else? Attempting to represent a broker other than the one that we're associated with. That means that we have to, if you're a full broker, like get rid of your provisional status, then you can be affiliated with more than one brokerage. But if you're provisional, for the most part, you can't. There's one case where you can, but I don't think we're gonna have to talk about that in this class. But I, for instance, could be affiliated with a broker in Wilmington and then a separate one here in Charlotte, as long as both of those BICs know that I'm doing it. You can't be secretly affiliated without both of the brokers in charge knowing. What else? Failing to remit for monies coming into their possession. When people write us checks, not checks to us, but when they write checks that need to go along with their offers to purchase. Earnest money. Anybody heard of the term earnest money? What about due diligence money? Who's heard of the term due diligence money? That's a fancy little unicorn that came into our market, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. Not every state uses it, but anyway, anytime they write checks, we have to be very careful with those checks and do certain things with them. So we have certain time limits that we can hold on to them, and we'll learn more about that. Unworthiness, incompetence, paying commission for acts in violation, anything that's improper, fraudulent, or dishonest. We're going to get into all of this stuff. Performing a legal service. Oh boy, that's a big one. What does this mean? This whole item 11 pretty much says, if you're not an attorney, don't act like one. Don't give legal advice. It's easy and tempting to fall into that trap because they might ask you something and you might actually know the legal answer, but we got to be very careful that any advice we're giving to our clients is only real estate advice, never legal advice. They could say this. I had this happen. I played in a little band and the keyboard player she lived with her mother. She was, I think she was probably in her 40s and her mother was elderly. And so they lived together. She had moved in because her mother needed some help. And she asked me one day after practice, she said, just curious, I'm on the loan for my mother's townhouse, but I'm not on the deed because she owned it first. And then I moved in and we refinanced because she had a bad mortgage. And I'm just curious. I do have a brother, and he's pretty cool. I don't think he would cause any problems, but I feel like to do this properly, I should also be on the deed if I'm on the mortgage. And that's a good point. What I didn't say is, here's what you should do. Here's the type of deed you need to draw up. What her choices were are something we're going to get into next week, and this will make more sense then, but basically, did she need to be a tenant in common or a joint tenant with her mother? Those are two ways you could co-own property with someone. A third one is called tenants by the entirety. Anybody ever heard of these terms at all? There's no reason that you should have unless you've done some real estate studying before or maybe had a license in another state. Tenants by the entirety is only for married people, so that doesn't apply to her and her mother, right? So I would have never said, and I didn't say to her, you should be a tenant in common with your mother. That's the best one. That would be me giving her legal advice, even though that's true. I I said, well, here are the two choices. You could do this or that, but let me connect you with a good real estate attorney who can advise you on which is best for you. I never heard back. I kind of wondered if she went ahead and did it. And this was around April of several years ago. In September that same year, I found out her mother actually just got diagnosed with advanced cancer, like stage 4. And I couldn't help but wonder if she took care of that issue, because it sounds like it might be real important here shortly. And sure enough, a month later, the mother was gone. And I did find out, because she called me and said, well, you and your wife play the funeral, but then also I did take your advice. I talked to the attorney and we chose to do so-and-so, and would you come list it for me? So it all kind of worked out. And she did take the advice, and she changed the deed over, which made things a lot easier once the mother passed away. So don't give the legal advice, even if you know the answer, right? Commingling is a big word they like to test on, by the way. That just means whenever they write a check, like the earnest money check, you need to put that somewhere. You need to park it in an account, but you can't put it in your own personal checking account. You can't even put it in your firm's operating account. It's got to be put into a very special. Anybody have any idea what kind of account, what the name of such an account would be that you'd need to put someone else's money for a real estate transaction? There you go. Brian says a trust account. Will says an escrow account. Right and right. They're called that. Trust account, escrow account, it's a place for other people's money. And if you're guilty of not putting it in that kind of special account, then you're guilty of commingling. Mixing your money, mingling your money with someone else's. Failing to deliver in a reasonable time a copy of things. Copy of what? Any purchase agreement, offers to buy or sell to the buyer and seller. We have to deliver to our client things that they sign. And we need to do it within 3 days of when we got it. For instance, this offer with your buyer, they signed it. Well, give them a copy. And then once that offer becomes a contract and the other party signs it, now you have an executory contract. Send that to your buyer too, within 3 days of when you get it back from the other side, all signed. And we've got to keep those things. That's testable. Give this stuff to also your BIC. So your broker in charge and your client within 3 days of being signed. Side note, we've got to keep everything in a given transaction for a certain amount of time, and that is 3 years. So we have to keep all files for 3 years. That means what? What sorts of things fall under that? It's how many offers did you write for your buyer? In a market these last 4 or 5 years we've been in, when I teach continuing ed classes, I just taught about 3 dozen of them in the last month and a half, 2 months, because everybody waits to the last minute. And I ask in every class, hey, how many offers did you have to write for your buyer before they finally won and beat out the multiple offers? And lately this year, it's been lower. It's been like average 3 to 5. So you got to try 3 to 5 times before you actually win. And the seller takes your client's offer, gets it worked out. But in years past, like last year and beyond, 13, 37, 83 offers before one got accepted. Now that's a combination of problems, probably. That's like maybe you're looking all over the world. Maybe you're they're just not listening to the agent about what it's going to take to win, and it's just hard to accept. Maybe they're just really not ready to be a buyer, and so that's just a lot of trial by fire, kind of learning the hard way. But reality, and that's tough. Can you imagine? You just want to get paid on this one transaction, and this one transaction is really kind of 80 transactions, but you're only still getting the one paycheck from the one, right? Thankfully, that's not the norm anymore. It never was the norm, but it's really less than that now. But all 83 of those offers need to be kept for 3 years by that agent who wrote them. They needed to have all been given to the client and then kept for 3 years. How can they be kept? They can be printed and stored physically, killing trees, printing off papers, right? Or they can be kept electronically, or both. I would always suggest either way you do it, have redundancy in place. Don't just keep one. Even if all you do is keep it electronically, scan everything and keep it electronically. Keep a version on a zip drive at your house, maybe locked up in a safe, and then keep another version in the cloud somewhere. Dropbox, Google Drive, something like that. Failing to deliver a detailed and accurate closing statement at time the transaction is consummated. What does all that mean? It means the client needs to see where all their money is going when you have a closing. And it's going to be given in a certain format, either called a closing disclosure or a HUD-1 form. We'll talk about that later. And then also, we as brokers do not prepare that closing disclosure. The attorney does. Actually, the paralegal does. But we have to know enough to double check all the math and make sure that everything got migrated from the contract over to this closing disclosure accurately. It's on us. We could get in trouble if we miss a mistake. If we need to verify that things like, was there a home warranty? Okay, who's paying for it? The seller? Is it in the seller expense column on the closing sheet? Or is it the buyer that needs to pay something? Do they need to pay for the home inspection still? And did that show up in the buyer's expense column? Or is the buyer getting a credit toward their closing costs from the seller as part of the negotiating? Maybe the seller said, I'll sell you my house. And the buyer said, well, I'll buy your house, but only if you help me pay my closing costs. Not something we see a lot right now in this kind of heavily seller's market, but it's very typical in a balanced market. And it's on our shoulders, on our responsibility as the broker to make sure that amount of money actually happened. Did the seller actually pay $4,000 toward the buyer's closing costs? Where do we see it on the closing disclosure? And I've caught many things over the years that the paralegal, think about this, they have a bunch of closings going, they might miss something. They're plugging numbers into an Excel spreadsheet basically. But even that, if it's in the wrong column, it gets added instead of subtracted. That's an easy thing to mess up. So we need to make sure, and we have a responsibility to do so. My favorite one is this last one, violating any rule adopted by the commission. It's like a CYA for them. It's a covering of their assets. Cover your assets, right? They're saying, hey, did you violate a rule? Well, you're also guilty of violating a rule. So you're guilty of 15 plus whichever 1 through 14 that you did as well. So that's a good one. Being solid with these 15 things is really good to study because it's reflected in the comment section as well. And just continuing on down because a lot of this stuff shows up there. Don't forget, they're cross-referenced here in the comments section, but they are also actually linked. So rather than trying to go find it in those other PDFs, you could look back at the syllabus and say, oh, here it is, Rules Section 58A 1900. Just click it. And what you didn't see that just happened, I'll show you. My browser just popped over to it. So you can actually see it without having to deep dive and go flip through a bunch of pages or scroll down and see stuff. So that's useful. Okay, let's dig back into our material here. Okay, good. There we go. Okay, we'll get into license law and commission rule. We just got a couple more slides to talk about as far as the business. So we talked about that there's going to be a few more bucks you're going to have to spend before you can start making money, like joining MLS, getting a lockbox key, which is just an application on your phone to let you open up those lockboxes. Used to be like a pager type device. Now they make you have an app on your phone. What are our choices once we have the license? What could you do with it? You initially have to learn some more things. You got to take those 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. So what are your choices as a brand new to the business person? If you don't have like a network or people that you know, then you might need to have some way of getting business to work on. And that's the thing. That's the balancing act in this business, doing the business, but also finding the people to do the business for, right? It's okay. Where's my camera? I lost my camera. Okay. I have 3 going. 2 different things. That lead generation is what fails people out. They get so good at the lead generation, and then they get a hook. They get a bite on the hook. They work with that client, and then they let their lead generation drop off. Then they close the client, and now their pipeline's empty. So it's a constant roller coaster, building up the pipeline and working the business, going back and forth. That's why partnerships can be successful, especially if you're like maybe a married partnership where one of you is the typical type A people person and the other is more of a back office. Let me just keep things organized. That's a good arrangement. Or if you're just 2 friends that like to want to partner together, if you're both gifted at the same thing, that's okay too. You're both good in front of people and making the relationships. Somebody's going to have to be doing the paperwork and keeping the lead generation machine going. And so what you might need to do in that situation is hire that part out. That's why the virtual assistant business is quite popular, because you probably need to hire one to fill in the blanks that you're not so great at. So you could be a single agent, general brokerage person doing your own thing at a given company. You could also be a member on a team. Anybody seen billboards of teams or can think of a team in your market that are like hugely known, well-known? Yeah, teams have gotten really popular in the last 10 years. And so you've got that rainmaker person whose face is on all the marketing and all the signs, and then he's supported by the buyer agents on the team. And so you, as a new agent, would probably start out life being a buyer agent. They don't give you the listings until you've proven yourself, because that's where the gold is. The listings keep the business afloat, and they're not going to trust a brand new person with that. You're going to have to learn and train to get to that point. But they do need help with all the buyer calls they're getting from all their marketing. And so once they know that you're good at it, they're going to hand you that buyer lead, whatever that means. How good is a lead? Hopefully they've vetted them and determined that they qualify for a certain type of loan, and they've done all that. Okay, now you got a good one. Now you go help them, find a place, get them under contract, write the offer, negotiate it. Once you have them under contract for a property, when you're on a team, you probably hand it off to a transaction coordinator, another team member. And they handle the things like scheduling inspections. They might even handle negotiating the repairs from the inspections. And then you're pretty much done with that particular client. It'd probably be smart for you to check in a couple of times so the client feels like that you're not just leaving them high and dry, but they're cared for by the other parts of the team, right? Then you get the next one, and you're just cranking it out. Buyer lead, get them under contract, hand it off. New lead, get them under contract, hand it off. So the lead gen is not in your wheelhouse. You don't have to do that. That's the benefit. The downside is your split is lower. If you don't have to do the lead generation, they're not going to pay you the same they would pay you if you were bringing business in. We'll talk about splits later. You could also be a new construction salesperson. When you go into a model home, it's not necessarily the case that that person there is licensed. They don't have to be. If they're selling the houses that are owned by that builder, their boss, then they can do that without a license. But many times, because they're interacting with us brokers, their employers want them to know the real estate side. So they might even pay for them to get their license. But that is another option. That's another one that takes the lead generation off the table for you. You don't have to worry about it because the builder's doing the ads. People are coming into the model homes. They would love for you to take some lunch to some agents and stay in touch with agents. You're kind of wooing agents, right? You're kind of reaching out to agents and keeping that network going, because about 80+% of the builder's business comes from agents representing clients, general brokerage agents. And then you could also be a licensed assistant. These agents that are getting busy and need help, They could choose to hire somebody without a license, but when you do that, as we will talk about today, that person you're hiring who has no license can't do just anything for you. There's only certain things they can do for you. So the better thing is to hire somebody with a license. So you could be a licensed assistant and then just kind of see and be that. You might even be the transaction coordinator person or a closing coordinator person. And you're on the team or working for a single agent and you're just doing what needs to be done behind the scenes so that broker boss of yours can go out there and do the real estate. And that's probably a great way to start this business because you can get a paycheck for the support you're giving, learn the stuff that we typically are bad at, and then ease into the actual real estate side of things, right? All of these choices of these four things comes down to this, the lead generation. Do you have something like that in place? Real quick though, not quick, but next, let's take a minute before this next break, since we've gotten some things out of the way, like who I am. You guys are going to be together, and you're also going to be possibly forming some study groups, which is highly recommended. By the way, let me point something out to you that I meant to do last night. If you go to that Google Drive link and look down toward the bottom, I think I mentioned it in the email, click on the shared contact if you wish. It's a Google sheet. And here's some of you have already done it. Go ahead, and if you're willing to, if you want to share your info, that's where you can do it. And obviously, we would never do that on your behalf because it's your choice, right? So you put whatever you want to share in terms of that contact information and make that available. So might be helpful to kind of know who's where and who's doing what. So let me give you guys some time. I want you to, okay, I'll get you that, Arnell. Let me set this. Okay, I've set the chat to private. Let me double check your email. Go ahead and give me the best email and I'll make sure I have the right one for you. Anybody else not receive it, let me know in the chat, please. You say it is or is not? It is? Okay. Yeah. I'll double check. Yeah, good idea. Let me see. I'll do that Notion link. Right. Hopefully that works in the chat, that Notion link. And I'm going to need to make sure. Okay, got a couple of you. I'll get that worked on at the break. But before the break, let me hear from a couple of you. Somebody unmute. Let me give you the questions again. Give us all. Start with your name. What's your background? Are you coming out of another career? Or are you still in a career? Maybe you've been a homemaker, taking care of the family, and you're wanting to get people are outgrowing the need for that, and so you need something to do. Maybe you are coming fresh out of school, or maybe it's been a while since you were in school, or maybe it's been the military. Whatever your background is, just give us some idea that you might want to share. And then let me know what motivates you. And then also what market or what area you think you'll work in. Let me kind of give you some example here. My thing is I got into the business fresh out of college in 1996. Graduated UNC Chapel Hill, got into the business. And fast forward, 2001, my dad was a hardworking diesel mechanic for 50 years. He started having this sinus infection, and we thought it was his face kind of was getting swollen, getting kind of red, and went to the doctor. They couldn't figure it out. He finally had more tests, and I was showing properties, and they called me and said, "You need to come home because we got to take him to the ER." Because the test came back and he needs to start radical chemotherapy ASAP. The reason his face was swollen was a tumor was clamping down on a major artery up to his brain. My brother was 14 years old at the time. I was like 27. Long story short, of course, it was about an 18-month journey from that diagnosis to his passing. Thankfully, because of this business, this career choice of real estate, I had the flexibility. Even though I was still very busy, I could move that time around. My brother was playing high school football. My brother was 15, needed tutoring and classes, plus his dad was sick. So thank goodness for this business, the flexibility. Some of you might have that in your answer. You might be doing this or interested in this because of the flexibility. When I hear that word and people say, I want the flexibility, I say it's the most flexible 80 hours a week you'll ever work. Kind of halfway kidding, because it could be a lot, but you can craft it around your other obligations. And that's what I was able to do. Fast forward another 13 years, in 2014, my mom diagnosed with cancer as well. Thankfully, she only had 6 months between New Year's Day of 2014 and when she passed away in July that year. But because of this business, yet again, I was able to be there, take her to the appointments, take her to the chemo, and every day see her. Do you think those are the most important 6 months worth of days to me? You bet. My brother had what I call a real job. He couldn't be there every day, right? And so it meant the world. I was even able to do the business from the many, many waiting rooms I sat in, waiting for appointments and chemo treatments, and handle things with laptops and cell phones as needed. So not easy, but doable, but possible. So the flexibility has meant the world to me in very important parts of my life. So what motivates me? The challenge. There was a time in my naive 20-somethings, not saying when you're 20-something you're naive, I was, but I just thought, because I looked around and the first two people in the business I talked to were two ladies, kind of 40-something at the time ladies, and I thought, is this only a business for ladies? Why am I doing this? And I realized, wait a minute, as I dug deeper, I could relate, because I saw these are business people building teams, building businesses, ladies, men, all kinds of people are doing this business. And you can turn this into whatever you want it to be for yourself. You can niche down, help just the military, right? Be a specialist in VA loans, be a specialist and help first-time home buyers, or help relocating buyers, whatever speaks to your past. I've heard of successful agents in other markets who, since they just moved to maybe Texas from California, they know what it's like freshly to be a brand new to Texas agent. And so they made that their niche. By the way, not in the curriculum, but here's the part to start with about building your business. Pick a specialty. Pick something that you learn a lot of stuff about and can tell the world that you're an expert at. So at this point, let's go ahead and take our break. But when we come back from break, I'm going to have you guys just kind of, it doesn't have to be long, not like mine, just a couple minutes or not even that. Just tell us all these things about yourself. I'll leave this up so you can be thinking about it. And I'll see you back here in 10 minutes.
college student who was last seen making her way to the bus stop one September morning in 1990. Has worked on drug-related cases walking in the darkness. And she had a haunt Jay Lee before she knew about. Agenda. I can't even believe this is true. It kind of reminds me of and hanging out. Keith drove Belinda. She seems so believable. Two people who have shown Keith love. You feel safe at home. It's where you can run for Hunter. Heather brought to every situation, and she knew right away that she wanted to be friends with her. Way up the stairs to Heather's second floor apartment. She stood a terrible situation, and Heather's tracked down for information. Why this happened. She to stay alive and realize that Kelsey ever got with her time. They were asked. So I saw this dollhouse on Amazon, and I thought it would be really fun to create it. My grandpa used to do this for me before he passed away when I was little. So look at this, and then look at what I got in the box to create this. Slabs of wood. So I'm going to be taking you on my journey to making that dollhouse from all this. Here's a bunch of other ones they tried to promote in the package. It's very old packaging, by the way, and that is the one we're going to create right there, the Garfield. Here are the old school instructions on the assembly. That's pretty much all you get. So let's get started. I've created a replica of portions of the H.H. Holmes Murder Hotel that he used during the Chicago World's Fair to lure innocent people into thinking he was giving them a better life, when it turns out the only person he was trying to better was his narcissistic self. And there's so much to the story, so much you didn't know until I did my research. There are so many ways the story has been created a replica of portions of. Today's stories and bleach their blonde hair completely platinum white. And if they waitress business ideas that I've been only $11 form friendship. Plus, instead of buying a full price bottle that they may not even like, they can choose whatever they want. Scentbird also has really. She said she had 8, and she's telling. Marjorie explains her and Jay had been divorced for years. They did it for financial reasons and
And we begin this Sunday morning with
Okay, let's come on back together. There we go. All right. Somebody unmute and go first. Let's just make our way on through. Just a brief little mention of a couple of these things. Your background, what motivates you, what area you'll be working in or where you live, something like that, cities, that type of thing. Who wants to go first? Thank you. Good. Good to know. Yeah, commercial's a whole different animal. Great. Thank you, sir. Who's next? Go ahead. Gotcha. Thank you. Great. Good reasons. Who's next? What grade level have you taught? Yeah. Yeah. I've heard. That's what I keep hearing. That's funny. Thank you, Deborah. Who's next? That's good. So you want to build the houses that you sell ultimately? Maybe? Yeah. Sure. Yeah, winters and summers aren't fun, are they? When it's not 70 degrees. That's good. Thank you. Who's next? Yeah, sure. Yeah. There you go. That's right. Excellent. Well, if you have a background in counseling, that will be put to use. I joke with people in CE that on page 75 of the real estate license, it says we are psychiatrists. The real estate license is only one page. But it also says we have an amendment to our driver's license. We can speed on the way to a closing or if we're late for a showing. And we have to be a marriage counselor a little bit too. So just kind of knowing how people work is beneficial. You'll be ahead of the curve there. Nice. Who's next? Fight over it. I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Yeah, Daria. Is that the right way to say it? Okay. Mm-hmm. That would be fun. Go ahead. Who was that? Was it Corey? Yeah, go ahead, Corey. Wow. Great, great. Are you familiar with the CCIM designation? So for everyone, if you remember the alphabet, those letters I had behind my name and I talked to you about last night, The SRES was one of them. The PS, or what was it? The PSA. The CCIM is probably, I call it the PhD of real estate designations because it's geared primarily toward investors and commercial brokers. And obviously all of these you have to have a real estate license in order to get, but it literally costs more than, by the time you're done with all the classes for the CCIM, it's about 10 grand or more. So it's like real content, substantial. And then it's to renew it. Typically for a lot of these designations, the renewal every year might be $100. This one is like $600. So it's real deal. And it talks about how the financing works and how the investment analysis works. So very geared toward investment and commercial. That might be something to put on your long-term goal list to kind of add to the mix. And I've talked to a lot of CCIMs and they all recommend that even if you don't pursue the full designation, just the intro first class, which I think is $800 to $1,000, is still beneficial because of the sort of analysis kinds of information. It sounds like it might fit right in with what you're already really good at. So that might be something to add to the long-term goal list. Who's next? Excellent. Oh, yeah. Wow. Wow. Good. Was that a Zoom class or was it in person? Okay. Probably one of the first Zoom classes. That's why I do these now. Because back then, I don't think we did this the first couple of nights. And I just missed the connection. And I could go a whole class and I'm talking at faces that are just barely visible. And back then it was definitely, I didn't have this set up. And it's just so easy to not even know who you're interacting with. So good to see you again. Thanks for mentioning that. Who's next? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gotcha. There's a lot of that to be done. I tell people it is certainly a seller's market, but it's also a landlord's market because, boy, man, they just have you seen, I'm sure in your area too, are there these, a lot of times you'll see luxury apartments going up or just any kind of investment property. It's just huge in the business. And that's a special expertise to be that detail oriented, to work for an owner and manage those tenants, handle those evictions when you need to. And that's just a whole very specialized niche. So good to know. Who's next? Yeah. Arnell? Oh, good. Good. Good to know. Who's next? Gotcha. That's good. I think we got a couple more left. Who's next? Hey. How old is he? Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you. Good to know. Who wants to go next? Hey, Sheena. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's okay. You can work your way to that, but it's just nice to put it on the radar. And even a lot of people gravitate toward the first time buyer niche only because they feel maybe a little less intimidated because you already know laws and rules that a first timer definitely doesn't know. When you're selling to people that have sold 3 or 4 houses, they tend to feel like they know everything. Some of them. And if you're brand new, sometimes that can come across, whether you admit it or not. Now, you don't even have to admit it. I'm a longtime proponent. If somebody asked me, I was scared to death, by the way, 23 years old, that somebody would jump out of the bushes and say, you don't even own your own house. You live with your parents. What are you trying to help me buy a house for? No one ever did. They never said that. But I learned to kind of laugh it off for the few that did approach the topic. And sometimes people would say, how long you been in the business? And I would just say, kind of laugh it off and say, oh, long enough to know better than to answer that question. Ha, ha, ha. They don't care. It's about how well you're taking care of them, right? They really don't care. It just means they don't have any better questions to ask. And so if you win them over by how knowledgeable you are about the market, which is easy to get because you joined the MLS and you can study the sales numbers, right? You can get up to speed on the market really quick with stats and start talking about that sort of thing and then go visit new construction and go preview properties, and then you're going to know at least this much more than just the random consumer. And if that's what you focus on and talk about the things that you know, that's all it takes. You don't have to be some walking encyclopedia about your chosen niche. You just have to know a teensy bit more than the next person, than the average consumer does. And they're going to probably assume you know way more than you really do. And you're sort of almost fake it till you make it, constantly learning, but you're going to have a head start, and that's okay. And that's all I'm talking about, is just pick something that interests you, because you'll be more interested in learning more about it so that you can kind of be the chosen expert. Who's left? Victor. That's great. Smart, by the way. Those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the term house hacking, what he's done is bought a duplex using the privilege of the lower interest rates you get from an owner-occupied mortgage, because they incentivize you to be a homeowner, right? So he can do that and live in one side of the duplex while he rents out the other side. And then also some tax advantages, most likely. He can deduct what he spends to renovate because he's living there, but it's also an investment property. So he can probably live there. I imagine your goal is at least a couple of years, perhaps, and then you'll stick someone else in the side that you're living in. What's your goal? Nice. Oh, good. Do it again. Gotcha. Yeah, there's a minimum when you get a loan. Right. Gotcha. That's smart. Yeah, he's working it, going to live there while he's working on it, and just move on to the next one. At some point, he can use what's called a 1031 tax deferred exchange for some various investment property and defer paying capital gains taxes for basically ever and ever till he dies if he wants to, and exchange into the next type of property. It's just real estate for real estate. We'll be talking about investment related things at some point in this class too. Not deep diving, but that's some of the stuff that he's going to be dealing with, that all of you who have that interest in investor property will need to know about too. Thank you, Victor. Who's next? Is that everybody? I think we might. Got it. Smart. You may as well, since you'll know the system. And you can basically set up a team that kind of handles the day-to-day and just kind of be the face person. That's smart. Excellent. Who's not gone? I think we had heard from everybody, if I'm not mistaken. I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, good. All right. Let's just dive into this. Sorry, let me get set again. There we go. License law and commission rule now. Talk about what we can do and what we are not allowed to do. So again, license law commission rule is the state portion of the exam, not the national, because we're talking about North Carolina real estate license law and North Carolina real estate commission rules. And the comment section is 10 out of those 40 questions. So looks like this. It's the newest version. I gave you the PDF. And for every unit that we study in our 10 weeks together, there will be, I'll give you learning objectives. It's a requirement by the Real Estate Commission where we identify the level 1 versus level 2 versus level 3 information. So the level 1, again, is what's the definition? What's the meaning of the word essentially? And so in that level 1 are what are broker in charge requirements, general licensing provision, who is on the Real Estate Commission, and what are the various categories of having a license. Level 2, application, means you can interact with the information a little bit, compare and contrast. So what requires a license, what is involved with handling trust money, other people's money. Then level 3 is the highest level of interaction. What can you do with the information? A lot of times it has to do with math. In this case, it has to do with what are the prohibited acts. On the test, they would give you a paragraph. You need to identify what did the agent do wrong, if anything. And then we'll talk about some more general provisions. So it all starts here. And we touched on that last night, I believe. Who needs the real estate license at all? You don't need one if you're doing this for free, just out of the kindness of your heart with your HGTV PhD, right? But if you are doing real estate for another person for some sort of compensation, then you need the real estate license. And that's a very common testable question that they like to ask. So watch out for that one. Compensation, what does that mean? Does that mean cash? Does that mean checks? It could be any sort of compensation. Cookies, a plate of cookies, right? Grandma gave you lunch or free rent in that side of the duplex you live in. So be careful about that. How many kinds of real estate licenses are there? Well, a lot of you have mentioned all sorts of areas in the business you're interested in. A lot of you said commercial and property management and as well as residential. None of you mentioned auctioneering, but that is something that also requires a real estate license. If you want to use auctions as a way to sell your listings, then you need a real estate license as well as an auctioneer's license. Testable item, by the way. You need both, real estate and auctioneer's license. And even just representing a renter, helping somebody find a place to rent, you need a real estate license to do that. So do you have a separate commercial license and then you want to specialize in property management, so you have to go back and get a property management license? Thank goodness no. The one license handles all of it. What the commission has to say about this is just make sure you learn how to do whatever it is you're doing. Surround yourself with expertise. Have a broker in charge that knows the same stuff. The commission does not want someone to be a commercial real estate broker and their broker in charge of the firm that they work under has never interacted or dealt with commercial real estate at all. That would not be okay. The commission says, hey, Bix, brokers in charge, you better be experienced in all of the things that the brokers you're over are wanting to do. If you're a broker in charge over some people that are doing property management, you better have a property management experience or commercial experience or whatever it is, right? The last firm I was at before I started my own, he did not allow us to do property management because he didn't want to be a BIC over property management brokers. And I was fine with that because I didn't want to do it myself. But if I had wanted to do it, I would have had a couple of choices. With his agreement, if he signed off on it and he was okay with it, I could have gone to another firm and joined that firm to be a property manager while still working under his firm for sales. So I could have done the sales under his and property management under the other one. Or instead of joining another firm, I could have just started my own and done the property management under my own firm. Again, as long as he knew about it. The brokers in charge that you work under need to know that you're working under more than just them. So it comes back to this. There are 4 different license categories, just one broker license, but what is the category of your license? Well, you will all start with the category of provisional. You start out in this business as a provisional broker on inactive status. The way that you activate your status or become active is to affiliate with a firm. And I like to say, pick a BIC, pick a broker in charge with whom to affiliate. So that will be all of your initial steps into the business. Then you can do pretty much everything, almost everything except maybe 3 things as a provisional broker that you can do as a non-provisional. So you can go ahead and be making money doing your provisional brokerage thing, selling houses, helping people, helping renters, even in commercial. You can't do property management though. You could work for a property manager because as long as you're working for another broker who's doing property management, you don't even need the license. So you could certainly be a provisional broker as well, but you couldn't be the main one. I am the broker property manager for so-and-so. You couldn't do that for people until you get rid of your provisional because it's more advanced, more nuanced. We'll talk about it later. So what do you have to do? What are the 3 things that you need to do in order to get rid of your provisional status? Tell me in the chat if you recall from that brief mention of it that I made last night, or maybe some of you've read ahead. What are the 3 things you have to do, or what is it that needs to happen in order to remove your provisional status? You got it. You got it. 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. Yep, 301, 302, you covered it all, and 303. And what's the time frame you have to complete those 3 classes? Got to get them all done no later than how many months? They run together. Sometimes people will say 180 days, but it's actually 18 months. I'm going to switch this back to where everybody can see all the answers coming in instead of just me, by the way. But most of you got it. 18 months, 1 year and a half. It used to be 3 years. 3 years to get those things done, and it was determined that's just too long. So now 18 months. What's the fastest you're allowed to get them done? What's the fastest you can take all 3 of those post classes? There is no limit as far as what the Real Estate Commission allows. It's just logistics. How fast can you actually find those courses available and take them, right? If you were to take 2 of them from one school, maybe that school happens to offer them both. Maybe one of them is like Monday, Tuesday, and the other is Thursday, Friday all day. Depends on the school as to how they're spread out. I've worked at a school before that gave post classes in this way. Thursday, Friday, 9 to 5 for 2 weeks in a row. So 4 full 8-hour days or 7+ hour days. And that may not work for the typical person's schedule who has to be at a job on Thursday, Friday, because they're still kind of transitioning from their W-2 job into full-time real estate. And so other people would take the weekend option. Some schools give it on Saturday, Sunday. Some schools might give it 4 hours at a time instead of 7 hours at a time. So it might take longer, take like 4 weeks, 2 nights a week or 2 days. So it just depends on the school. You have to do some shopping to find the one that works. But if you could find a school that offered maybe 2 in a given 2-week period and then another school that whatever time's I wouldn't advise it. It sounds like a lot to do 90 hours in like 2 weeks time, but you could do it. There used to be a rule against doing more than one class in a 7-day period, but they don't have that rule anymore. You can stack them up, whatever you can accomplish. Is there a test? That's the next question I always get. Yes, there is a test at the end of post-licensing classes. However, when I'm teaching post classes, the first night or first day, I will tell people, you remember what it was like in pre-licensing, and it was sort of like all about, can I pass the test? What do I need to know to pass? This is not that. I'll tell them. I'll tell those post students that the test is not the same kind of intensity. Think about it this way. The Real Estate Commission just gave you a license. They don't want you to get back out of the business. They're not going to make us test you to some advanced way that throws people back out. Most people pass those tests, in other words. And if you don't, as long as you're still within your 18-month window, just retake it. If you fail within a few points of the 75% pass rate requirement, then you can, I think some schools are different, but within a little bit of wiggle room there. You can just retake the test one time. But you might, if you fail by too much, have to retake the whole class again. But I rarely saw people fail post classes. If I did, it was 302, and they were freaked out by the math, because that's a little bit more math than the other 301 or 303. So don't worry about it. Here's the other thing. How much is it to renew your license every year? Do you remember that from last night? How much do you have to pay to renew your real estate license every year? You got it. $45. And when is that due? $45 is due every year by what date? Also testable. There we go. June 30th. You got it. Some people will be confused because they might say June 10th. What is it that's due by June 10th every year? Not the money, but something different. We do have a deadline of June 10th in this industry to keep our license. What is it? Yeah, there we go. Victor says your continuing education is due by June 10th, and that is correct. Here's the other thing about it. On June 10th is when you have to drop dead no later than complete your continuing education. That could be, it's going to be 2 classes, 2 4-hour classes. One of them is an update class. It's called the general update. Once you become a broker in charge, or if you become this thing called BIC eligible, that one there at the bottom, then you don't take the general update anymore. You take an update called the BIC update, broker in charge update. You just swap it. Instead of Gen Up, you take BIC up. So you're taking some sort of an update course for 4 hours, and then you're taking a 4-hour elective. As of now, the update course has to be instructor-led. It can be Zoom, but it could be like this, live, real time, me talking to you, or butts in seats, breathing the same air, some physical location like the good old days. You could do it that way too. You can't do update courses in a self-directed format. Anybody ever sat through a class without a teacher? Self-directed. You just hit play, watch the material. They might quiz you along the way. How was it? Did you enjoy it or not? Sometimes it's tedious, right? Because you're like, can we just be done? You might have even been able to fly through it, but they put the brakes on you and said, nope, you got to do it at a certain pace and you're going too fast. We won't release you from this course unless you've spent a minimum number of hours. And that is the case as well when it comes to the elective. The elective, you could do a self-directed version. There's plenty that are also like this, Zoom, and there's also some that are live in person. But the elective is allowable to be in fact, every class in this business except the update is allowable to be given self-directed, including this one. You could take this 75 minimum hour pre-licensing class in a self-directed format, and that's an option. But I'll let you decide if that is something. Obviously, you didn't choose to do it this time. I wouldn't choose to do it either. I think there's a lot of value. I think I've mentioned guitar, about trying to read to learn guitar. Sometimes I have a question and I try to deep dive the answer to a guitar lesson, and it takes me an hour to YouTube and Google it. There's value in having a live instructor, and you can say, hey, tell me this, and they can tell you that right now. That's crucial in a 75 plus. In this case, we do it for 85 hours because you need it. 75 is the bare minimum. And I think the pass rate is kind of predictable. The less time you spend learning this stuff, the lower your chances of success, right? So that elective is just a 4-hour class, and quite often you could take the self-directed version. I usually do that because it can fit. That's the good part about it, is you can take it at 3 in the morning or wherever and fit it around your schedule. So let's say it's June 10th and it's 10:30 at night. And you all of a sudden think, oh my gosh, I bought the elective course. I paid for it, but I forgot to hit play and do it. It's 10:30. Midnight is in what? 2.5 hours or hour and a half. You don't have enough time. The minimum, the fastest you could do a self-directed elective course is 3 hours, 20 minutes. So you absolutely will not successfully finish all your CE by June 10th in that situation. So what's going to happen on June 11th? Nothing. You are still active. Your license is still active on June 11th. It's just that you can't do anything about it at this point because the commission won't let us schools give you any CE classes between the 11th and the 30th. So you see the train coming down the tracks. You see the light coming down on you. On July 1st, the start of every license year, you absolutely will go inactive. Nothing you can do about it if you missed your CE by June 10th. See what I'm saying? So the testable question is this. Is your license inactive if you missed June 10th? Is it inactive on June 11th through 30th? No. It's still active, but it's going to absolutely be inactive with nothing you can do about it as of July 1st. I'm set on the schedule of another school to teach 2 CE classes on July, the first week of July. One is, I think, the 5th and one is the 6th. And let's just say the attitude, the mood in that room will not be the mood in this room. It's going to be people that are like, can we just hurry this up? I can't believe I'm in this situation. I'm inactive. I got to get active again. Hurry up. Let's be done. Right? They're going to be stressed. First week of July, probably the whole first month in July, nobody's taking CE unless they have to make up something and fix a problem, probably. So that's what all that looks like. Provisional brokers, which you'll start as. Take those 3 30-hour classes. You'll become non-provisional. Then you can optionally choose to become a broker in charge if you want to do that with your life. Or you could, instead of being a broker in charge, you could just be ready to be one. That's what BIC eligible means. In order to be a BIC or BIC eligible, you have to be a full broker, meaning not provisional. Non-provisional. Only non-provisionals can be BICs or BIC eligible. What's the difference between BIC and BIC eligible? You could be a BIC eligible holder, status holder, forever and ever and never actually become broker in charge. But it's nice for every firm to have a couple of brokers that have BIC eligible status in case their BIC, for instance, misses June 10th. What if your BIC gets so busy they forget? And on June 11th, they wake up and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I'm still active, but on July 1st, my license will go inactive because I forgot that elective or whatever. If they could hand off the baton of their BIC status over to another person in the firm, then they'll be okay. Here's the problem. If your BIC goes inactive, every provisional broker in that firm also goes inactive. And I've heard of some firms with 200 provisional brokers. That seems like a lot of provisional brokers for a BIC to have to handhold. Remember that part? If you're provisional, your BIC has to basically know every move you make in real estate and be right there tuned in to your every transaction because they're guiding you, making sure you do them right. So if your BIC screws up, forgets, I don't know how many people actually do this as BICs. I think probably very few. But even it might even just be that the BIC needs a break. The BIC needs to stop BICing for a while and they want to hand off and get a month break. Well, if they have a BIC eligible person in the firm, then they can just fill out an online form at the Real Estate Commission website and say, now I'm no longer the BIC. This person over here is going to do it. They're the BIC now. And then when they're ready to take it back over, either because they're refreshed or because they fixed their problem because they did go inactive and they need to fix that, then they can say, now it's back to me. Fill out the form. Now I'm the BIC again. You with me? So that's what BIC eligible means. You don't ever have to be it, but it's nice for somebody to be BIC eligible. Let's see, the question is, once you're in non-provisional status, are you still required to work under a BIC? Good question. So you have a couple of choices. If once you're non-provisional, you could choose to start your own firm and then you be your own BIC. That's one option. But if you are going to do real estate, if you're going to have money and handle other people's money and have a trust account to do so, if you're going to have any affiliated brokers under you, and do any sort of promotion for your real estate business, then you do need a broker in charge. So think about those 3 things. A trust account. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Yes. Yes. Short answer is yes. As a non-provisional, meaning you got those 3 post classes done, then yes, you can do that. And what most people do who just basically you want to be your own boss and have your own firm essentially. Is that what we're talking about? And kind of do your own thing. Even like me, that's what I literally am doing. In April of 2018, I left the previous firm I was at. No bad blood. I just decided the name of that firm was his last name, and I wanted to build out under my name. So here's what I did. And most of this stuff is testable too. So I went to the North Carolina Secretary of State website. I did a search for the name that I wanted to make my firm, and I found a name that was not taken, and I paid, I think it was like, in my case, I chose to set up as an LLC, limited liability company. But you have other choices. You could also do a C corporation or a subchapter S corporation or an LLP, limited liability partnership. Those are all types of entities, legal entities. So because I set up my LLC, when I get paid from a real estate closing, I have the attorney write the check to my LLC name. I'm a manager of my LLC. I'm the only one, right? And so then I give myself money, but I don't have them write it to Neil Pender because the LLC or any other entity has some tax advantages and also liability protection. Whatever the LLC assets are what are subject to lawsuit potential, but not my personal stuff because I work in real estate so that's probably what most people would do, some sort of an entity like that. When you set up an entity though, the real estate commission steps in and says, well, you're getting paid in the name of an entity. That entity is doing real estate for other people for compensation in the name of the entity. Well, then the entity needs a firm license also. So you're paying $45 for your Misha license as a human broker. You're also going to have to pay another $45 for Misha's LLC or whatever entity you choose to set up. No, not a big deal, but and because you set up a firm to accomplish this goal, that firm needs to have a BIC, and it can be you. So the real estate commission application would say, who's going to be the BIC of this new entity you've set up? And you'll say, I'll do it. And that's what I did. So I went to the Secretary of State website, paid $150 to set up the LLC. I paid him another $50 to hurry up and tell me the answer instead of taking 3 or 4 days. And 6 hours later, I had a Secretary of State identification number because I needed that to go to the Real Estate Commission website and fill out the Make Me a New Firm application form. And I said, here's my SOS ID number. Make me a firm in this same name as the entity I've just created. And oh, by the way, I'm the BIC. And boom, done. Now I operate as Impact Carolinas Realty LLC. And that's who gets paid. And then I handle tax stuff from there. And I don't have anybody under me because I didn't want to do the management side of that. If I do, I'll probably build out my own little team that's just my production. It's not like I have random single agents doing their thing under me, which I could do as well. But then I'm going to have to manage them a little bit, be responsible for making sure that they do certain things right, like advertising. No violations with advertising, among some other things that we'll learn about tonight. Does that help? So it's all about getting rid of that provisional status. Then you can do that sort of thing. Now, here's the other piece, though. In order to be a broker in charge, you have to have 2 years of full-time experience in the business. So if you make yourself BIC of your newly formed firm, you're going to have that experience accomplished. So it might be at least 2 years if you're full-time, 4 years if you're part-time. How do they make you prove it? It's going to be a combination of how many transactions you did, plus did you really do real estate full-time for 2 years? Did you also work as an analyst for this company for 40 hours a week? And do we believe that you did 2 full 40-hour-a-week jobs, real estate plus that? You're going to have to do various things to prove to them that you were full-time or part-time or whatever you're claiming that you are. Then you can get the BIC designation. But in the meantime, probably just easier to get rid of your provisional status, become non-provisional, and work under a firm that you've picked and there's all kinds of firms. There's the kinds that are really kind of pushing you toward production. And then there's some maybe smaller firms that are like, hang your license with us, sell something when you want to, and pay us a cut off the top. And the splits vary as well. As a general brokerage, just a single agent, I started at a large independent firm in Charlotte. And at the time, I don't know if they still do it, I started at a 50-50 split. So I got to keep half of whatever that commission was on that side. And then over time, as I hit a certain level, I got another 2%, 52 instead of 50, and then 54, and then 58, and then 60, all the way up to the max. I think at that firm, they stopped us at 75 or maybe 80. But then there's other firms that are like, it's just a straight 80-20 split. You get 80% of what you bring in. We just take 20. And then there's other firms that are like, you get to keep all of it, but pay us a transaction fee of $250. But we're not going to give you any leads. That's the trade-off. Does the firm provide you any leads or not? The bigger the split, the less chance that they're going to actually help you with lead generation without you having to maybe pay like a referral fee to get it. The team concept where you just come in as a hired gun buyer agent kind of thing, and they just give you the buyer lead and you go get them under contract and pass off the folder and get a new buyer lead. Now we're talking in your pocket, probably like 40%. 40 to 42%. But again, you're not having to spend any time or money on the lead gen. It's also not your name so much on the signs or anything. You're just kind of fulfilling the role of a buyer agent helping buyers on the so-and-so person's team, right? So those are your choices. I'd say eventually, though, you'll have the time experience allowable to become a BIC of your own firm, and then you can set that up and kind of do your own thing. But there's still many choices. The vast majority of firms out there across the state are smaller ones. There are a few that are bigger ones like EXP, Keller Williams, Remax, Allen Tate, Berkshire Hathaway. I'm sure you've seen all those names. But the vast majority, there are 17,000 firm licenses in North Carolina right now. 17,000. Most of those are like me. One little firm with one person or maybe a couple. And by the way, any guesses before we take our break? Just randomly, there's no reason for you to know this, but I just enjoy seeing what the guesses are. How many active licensed brokers in the whole state of North Carolina would you guess there are? Active licenses, provisional plus non-provisional combined, both of them across the whole state. How many active ones? Meaning they are keeping up on their CE and they're keeping on paying the $45 a year. They're able to do real estate. Got a 15,000, a 10,000, a 30,000. Up. Keep on going up. Thank you, Victor. Victor gave you some insight on forming an LLC. So when I said I spent $150 to do my own, I literally went to the site myself, filled out the very basic form. I could have hired an attorney for maybe $800 to $1,000. You could also use something like what Victor's talking about that'll probably give you a little more guidance than just going from scratch like I did. So there's a lot of options there too. Keep on going up. Make some higher guesses. Anybody else? How many? There it is. Victor says 100,000. Of human licenses, both provisional and non-provisional, there are about 87,700 of them. Another 17,000 firm licenses. That just means 17,000 people pay two sets of $45 like me, right? So about 101,000 active real estate licenses, firm plus human. But you know what? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. The only reason I mention it is this. Those of you who are entrepreneurially minded might have already done the math. Wait a minute, 101,000 active licenses times $45 a year. Who wants to partner up with the real estate commission and share the $4.5 million budget on just licensing fees? Yeah, let me have some of that. They're not offering, but that would be pretty nice. If you could get anybody to pay you $45 a year forever, take it, right? Let's figure it out. So that's kind of how that works. Let's go ahead and take a break. I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. together. Nice to have you back. For those of you who needed, I think it was 2 of you needed me to send you that email. Here we go. About to do that. There you go. Let me know by the end of the night if you did not receive that, and check your spam. That might be the culprit as well. Okay. Yeah. So the categories, let's see what else. So your provisional status is a temporary status, right? You don't get to keep that forever. It's impossible. It's going to have to be lifted. That provisional status has to become non-provisional or full. You might see the test question just use the word broker. Here's a testable tip to be careful about. This test, as you remember, is like, what, 2.5 hours on the national, 1.5 hour on the state. You're going to be tired. By the time you get to the state portion, you're going to have some fatigue, mental strain. You're going to possibly be thinking about a provisional broker and what they have to do and what they're limited by, but the question doesn't say provisional. It only says the word broker. And you might mentally screw that up and think provisional. Be careful. When they're talking about a non-provisional, they might say the word non-provisional, but they're probably going to say just plain old broker by itself. When you see the word broker with nothing in front of it, it means non-provisional broker, right? So that goes back to some test-taking hints and tips I'll give you when it comes closer to time. One of them is this. For every question, take a breath, read it, clear your mind, and think, okay, what is it asking? Who are we dealing with? Provisional or non-provisional? Is it just the word broker by itself? Or it could be offer versus contract, or buyer agent versus sub-agent to the seller. When we get to that crazy topic called agency, you're going to see a sentence. And the first time you read it, it's going to freak you out. And that sentence will say something like this. It's the selling broker helping the buyer as a sub-agent to the seller, so on and so forth. And it's like, what? What do all these words mean? That sounds like nonsense to you right now, but we'll get through it. We'll talk it out. I'm not even going to go there right now, but the word selling, ing, I will give you this so it can maybe imprint on your brain. Selling with an ing on the end, a selling broker always is the broker helping the buyer. The case could be made in your rationale, well, yeah, but the seller hires a broker and they're helping them sell. Forget it. Just believe me. There is no way to logically know this. You just have to memorize it, like right foot, left foot. You just have to memorize it. Selling broker means the one helping the buyer side, not the seller. They're not helping the seller. They're helping the buyer in some capacity. We'll talk about those capacities, those various ways they could be helping that buyer later. So if they're helping the seller, the broker helping the seller is probably going to be called the listing agent. They might be called the seller's agent, like with apostrophe S, like owned by the seller kind of thing. But helping the buyer, it's a selling, ing. Okay. Can't stay provisional forever. Got to get rid of that within 18 months. Then you become full. Here are the courses. You can take them in any order, by the way. Any of those post-licensing classes, 301, 302, 303, whenever they're available, take them when you want. The commission would like for you to take them in order, but it does not matter. You're not required to. 301 is about agency. 302 is about contracts and closings. 303 is about variety of things like commercial and some property management. It's really just a deep dive into this stuff. It's really like pre-licensing on steroids. There's a different book. There's a real estate manual that you'll get for those classes. One manual covers all 3 classes. I think it might be purple now. It's been blue in the past. And no later than 18 months or sooner. If you take longer than 18 months, what are you? inactive. You're an inactive. Your license is an inactive license because you go past your 18-month deadline, you can't practice real estate anymore. Your license went inactive. As a provisional broker, what are you required to do? What is it about that status as provisional? Brand new, basically. You can't be independent. You can't start your own firm. You have to be supervised by your broker in charge, holding their hand, right? Guided by them. That broker in charge is accountable more so for the provisional brokers in the firm than the other full brokers. So that BIC likes it when you get rid of your provisional status because it's one less person they have to handhold. They have to know what's going on. Some BICs do it better than others, by the way. In some post classes, I'll have questions at break times, like when it's a live in-person class back in the day, and they're asking me BIC questions. And I'm fine with that. I'm happy to help. I'm just like thinking to myself, your broker in charge should be way more tuned into your business and every transaction for you to have this question you're asking me right now. I answer, but I always say, hey, talk to your BIC, but here's this thing to know. And then sometimes people who ask me the most questions at breaks at a post class, the next post class, they have a different looking business card because they got tired of not having a BIC that answered the phone and they went to somewhere else. Sometimes it happens. Non-provisional, just the word broker by itself. You did your 3 classes. You now can act independently, less supervision by your BIC, or you could even just go out and start your own firm. You're individually accountable for your actions. And I mentioned the big brown envelope. So if you get the letter of inquiry, still kind of affectionately called the big brown envelope, and you're a provisional broker, your heart will stop, you'll have hyperventilate. Then you'll call your BIC and say, oh my gosh, I got this email letter of inquiry from the commission. And your BIC will say, I know, I got one too, because that's how that works. The BIC gets one too, if you're provisional and you get one. Now, if they went on to say something like, well, what did you do? They're probably part of the problem. They should know what's going on in your business that could cause this to have happened. And they're going to have to go up to the Raleigh Real Estate Commission office and appear before the commission just like you will. But when you get rid of your provisional status and you're a full broker and you get a letter of inquiry, if you were to, you call your BIC and say, hey, I got a letter of inquiry. And they say, I know, not because they got one too, but they do get a notification. The commission says, hey, BIC, you probably should know you're a full broker over here. We're looking into them. You don't have your own letter of inquiry, BIC, but notification that you got somebody dealing with some issues. And they may or may not need to appear before the commission. This is going to depend on, after looking at all the proof and the facts, does it look like that BIC did something wrong? Were they in on it with the broker in question? So even a non-provisional broker will still probably need a broker in charge if, again, those 3 things we mentioned based on that question before the last break, if they have affiliates under them, if they have a trust account, or if they do any sort of promotion. You can be a sole proprietor, which is what you are when you start this business automatically. Everybody's a sole proprietor, just like everybody's provisional. And everybody's inactive. Then you affiliate with the firm. And now you're a provisional active licensee, sole proprietor. How do you become not sole proprietor? Make a firm. Make an entity. You can create an entity. Well, if you're a sole proprietor like that, you still need a BIC if you're going to do any sort of promotion. Or if you have a trust account, or if you have affiliates under you. Say you don't have a trust account, you don't have affiliates, any sort of promotion. What does that mean? Tell me some things in the chat that I could mean by promotion. What sorts of activities or items are promotional? You got it. Flyers, websites, signs. Yeah. What's related to signs that's smaller? that everybody forgets. There it is. Arnell says business cards. You can't even print business cards unless you have a BIC. That would be promoting. So basically, you need a BIC. The only way that you don't need a BIC and could still make money in this business without a BIC is if, let's just say you're like a retiree. You've been in the business 40 years. Everybody knows you have a real estate license. You did real estate, but you're retired. And so you don't want a BIC anymore. You just kind of are sitting back enjoying your retirement, but you keep your license active. And occasionally somebody will call you from the past and say, hey, could you refer me to a good agent over in Asheville? And you could say, sure, let me connect you with them. And then that agent could pay you a referral fee, and you could earn that fee, and you don't need a BIC because you didn't promote. But the minute you put a Facebook post out there or even print a business card that says, I don't do this business anymore, but contact me for all your referral needs, you just promoted, and you need a BIC. You see what I'm saying? It's a very small window where you would not absolutely need a BIC because of that promotion thing. So for the most part, everybody needs one. That BIC supervises the provisionals, but they also are over the full brokers or the brokers, right? Non-provisional brokers, about certain things like advertising and trust account. If the firm has a trust account, then the BIC is responsible for it. What did I just say? From what I just said, tell me in the chat, does the firm have to have a trust account? If the firm has a trust account, then the broker in charge is the one who's responsible for it. So no, thankfully, I'm glad because I don't have one. I don't want one. I didn't know that. 20 years ago, I did my own little firm one time around back then, but then I left and went to some bigger firms over the years, and then I came back and did my own firm again. Whole different name, all that. The difference, back then, I didn't know that you did not have to have a trust account when you ran out your own firm. Now I did. In April of 2018, when I set up my own firm this time around, I did not open one. What is a trust account? It's just a checking account that has the word trust written on it that you open up only to put in other people's money. And you don't have to have one. So when I write an offer for a buyer, I'll contact that listing agent and say, hey, my buyer likes your listing over here. By the way, here's the offer and here's the earnest money. You're going to have to keep it in your trust account because I don't have one. And I'd say at least 80% of the time they say back to me, well, we don't have one either. Because since firms don't have to, we don't want to mess with it. What's involved? Well, you have to take a course. It's not the most exciting course. It's called Trust Accounts. How do you maintain a trust account? Basically, how do you maintain a checking account? It's an all-day course. I think it's available self-directed from the commission. And then you just have to check every month, reconcile it every month, make sure that you're not commingling and that you're doing it all right. Those of you who are inclined to be property managers, you're hearing this and you're thinking, that sounds like no problem at all because you're wired for it. And to be a property management manager is probably about the same skill set, same level of, I guess, expertise as what's involved in being good at maintaining a trust account. And by the way, you're going to have one if you're a property manager. So that broker in charge, if it's a firm that chooses to have a trust account, the broker in charge is the one whose license is on the line for making sure that trust account's handled properly. Here's the thing about trust accounts. We're going to get into this again, but yes, good question. Victor says, you can combine multiple properties in the same account when it comes to sales? Yes, all of those various earnest monies from all the various transactions can all be kept in the same one. Good question too. Deborah says, what if they don't have one? I stopped my story before I finished. So when I don't have one and the other firm doesn't have one, the attorney will do it. The closing attorneys always have a trust account, and we just say, hey, okay, just need to pick the closing attorney sooner than we used to. So our buyer usually picks the closing attorney, and we'll say, hey, buyer, who do you want to use to close this thing? What attorney? Because we need to put this earnest money in their trust account because neither we or the other firm have one. That's become very commonplace. As far as the multiple properties in the same account, when it's sales, yes. When it's property management, that gets a little different. You can do property management like tenant security deposits, but if you're managing homeowners associations, anybody write a check to a homeowners association for where you live? Well, it might be just a little board of fellow neighbors who are running the show. Or they might be tired of sending letters out because the garbage can didn't get put out of sight. And so they might have said, let's just hire a management company like Hawthorne or Cedar Management. And you sound familiar? Who's your management company? That's a professional homeowner association management company. It's not required, but it could be utilized because the community is so big, for instance. There is no difference between a trust and an escrow account. It's the same word. Basically, it's a synonym. So a trust account and an escrow account are the same thing. You're being entrusted to put other people's money in this account, essentially, is the idea there. What else? Oh, yeah, I don't know if I finished the thought. So if you manage these property management, these HOAs, if you're set up to manage homeowners associations of multiple neighborhoods, then you would have to have a separate or escrow account for each neighborhood's HOA. But besides that, you can put all of the other people's money in the same one when it comes to the sales side of the business. It's just that you can't put your money. Now, how do you pay for this checking account? Because I don't know about you, but I haven't found a bank yet that does a free one, right? Especially on a business level. So if you do open up a trust account, you're going to have to pay some fees to maintain that checking account, and you are allowed to put some of your money in the account without it being considered commingling for it to be used to cover those fees, up to $100 of your own dollars. $100 of your money can be in that account so that when those fees come due every month, $8 or whatever, because maybe you don't have the minimum amount in there because it's going to be fluctuating, right? Then you have enough to cover it. But here's the thing that could get you. That trust account is allowed to be something called an interest-bearing trust account. Anybody have an interest-bearing account? What does that mean? You get paid a few pennies on the balance in your account. Well, you can have a trust account that pays you interest as long as your clients understand that you're the one getting the interest payments. Because it's your account, you're getting the interest. That seems fair. You'd have to disclose to them that that's what's happening. But think about this. You have a maximum of $100 of your own money that you can have in there to cover the fees. What if the interest that you accrued in a given month pushed your money over that $100 threshold? Like now it's $100.31. Well, you're 31 cents into commingling. Right? So you're going to have to balance this thing every month to make sure that you keep enough cushion so that the amount of interest that might accrue won't push you over and cause this commingling. See what I mean by not worth the trouble? Unless you have a significant balance in there, and if it's your property manager, you kind of have to. But if it's just sales, why bother? Why? Who needs all that? You're certainly not going to make enough of interest to even be worth your effort. It's just another thing to be hassle with. And that's why I think more and more firms are like, we're not doing it. The bigger firms probably have one. The vast majority of smaller firms probably aren't going to bother with it. But regardless, if your firm does have a trust account, your BIC is the one who's got to make sure it's done right. Now, they can delegate it. They could say, hey, I don't want to mess with this daily. Office manager, I'm going to delegate to you. You put the money, write the checks into and out of the account, but every month when we reconcile, I'm going to take a look, make sure nobody's skimming off the top or doing anything nonsense that I could lose my license over. Oh, we talked about the advertising. Also, even if you're a full broker, your BIC is responsible for you when it comes to your advertising. So, I mean, think about it. Back in the day, 10 plus years ago, maybe even longer, when we said the word advertising in real estate, what did we mean? We meant flyers. We meant print ads in those homes. Anybody ever pick up the little circulars in the fronts of some mom and pop restaurants, little Homes magazines? $300 for a full page ad in one of those 20 years ago. I mean, people don't care about those books anymore. In fact, those businesses have had to turn it around and they say, you're paying for our online presence. We'll throw in the book portion and we'll give you the print ads included and blah, blah, blah. Right. So it was billboards. It was maybe TV and radio if you had a bunch of money, but it was certainly those Holmes magazines, little blocks. You might go in with a buddy and each of you takes 3 of those little blocks. But now it's much more advanced, isn't it? Anybody ever experienced Facebook advertising? You ever tried to run a ad campaign on Facebook or Instagram? Very commonplace now. Or even just made a post on your own Facebook business page and boosted it. Not ideal, but certainly there's a bunch of online advertising options. You could crank out something about your new listing while you're standing in the line at the grocery store, hit post, and there it is out there for the whole world. And if your BIC didn't have any sort of requirement on you to make sure that you got approval for that ad you just ran and you did it wrong, they've got a problem. Just like you have a problem. What could you do wrong? We'll get more into it later, but let me give you some hints. Give you some little spoilers. One big source of advertising violations is with regard to fair housing categories. We're going to talk about a whole chapter 19, I believe, of federal fair housing categories. You can't discriminate, keep somebody from having fair, equal access to real estate on the basis of familial status. That just means underage minors, right? Underage people. You can't say, we won't rent to you because you have a kid. Not allowed. Illegal. That's a familial status violation. Or single occupants only. Single person, one person only. Not allowed. What if they have a kid? You can't discriminate. So familial status, race, religion, sex, handicap, color, national origin. I think I hit them all. There's 7 of them. 7 protected classes. So if you run an ad, it might not even be that you're blatantly saying we don't want somebody from this class of people to live here. It's not that. It's that you might have even just said, like in Charlotte, you're only a block away from the Jewish Community Center. Wrong. Not allowed. What'd you just do? You mentioned a religion. Could you say a block away from the community center? Yes. But you can't say Jewish Community Center because now it might be taken that only Jewish people should live here. See the point, the nuance there? So your BIC is on the line. You are too, but so is your BIC. And when it comes to fair housing violations, if you get to the point of being fined, like in the court system, not by the commission because they wouldn't fine you, but the court system might if you get sued, times it by 3. You're looking at treble the fines, 3 times the fines just because it's a fair housing violation. That's how seriously the Real Estate Commission and we are all required to take this, as we should, because we want to make sure everybody has equal fair access to real estate. So that's a big one. Another one is something I think I mentioned last night, and that's blind ads, not admitting that you're a broker. If you run an ad that says, call me at this number about 123 ABC Street, and you don't say that you're a broker with so-and-so firm, you've just violated you've run a blind ad. So your BIC should have policies and procedures and training in place, maybe even an approval requirement. You can't run any ads without their approval so as to make sure that you don't violate these advertising requirements. Again, it goes back to why does the commission care? Because this could harm the consumer. All of these laws and rules we're going to learn these next 10 weeks are about it ultimately protects the consumer in the transaction. We talked about the experience level, full-time for 2 years in order to become BIC or BIC eligible. Here's another thing that's required. Let's say you get your 2 years full-time or 4 years part-time. You go online, you apply to become broker in charge, you fill out the form. They're going to say, okay, sure, you can be a BIC, but within the next 120 days, you have to complete a 12-hour course. What is it about the course? Online again, it's given only by the commission. We schools can't give it. We're not allowed to, the commission only. It's self-directed, right? You don't need to have one of me looking at you the whole time. And let's see, it's like $110. And it's a 12-hour course. It's self-directed, and 120 days from when you declare yourself BIC. Or if you go ahead and take the course because you know maybe sometime in the next year you're going to declare yourself broker in charge or BIC eligible, you could go ahead and take the course and you'll have an entire year. So if you take the course first, you have a whole year to declare yourself BIC or BIC eligible. If you go ahead and declare yourself broker in charge, you now only have 120 days. Think about it this way. You need to hurry up and learn how to be a BIC because you're BICing. You're being a BIC. You could go ahead and be a BIC without having the course yet because they give you 4 months to take it, 120 days. So those are the requirements. We'll talk about them more. Here's another kind of broker license. This one is called a limited non-resident commercial broker license. And let me do this. Then I'll show you the slide because sometimes people start reading and then they stop listening. This special kind of broker license is, as the name indicates, only for commercial brokers. You only need it if you're commercial. So think about it this way. You have a company in another state. Let's just say Virginia. It could be anywhere, Alaska. And you want to expand. You want to buy real estate in North Carolina related to your company, your business dealings. Should you have to, maybe you have a real estate team or a real estate person on staff because you've done some expansion. You've been adding locations in your home state. Now you want to branch out and come to North Carolina. If it's for a commercial purpose, then your real estate person can come here without a real estate license and do that commercial real estate for you. So it's a limited non-resident, meaning it's for commercial, and it's only if you don't live here. If you live in North Carolina, this is not available to you. It's only for non-residents. So it looks like that. Limited, non-resident, for commercial only, not residential, broker's license. An out-of-state licensee for a commercial purpose can come to North Carolina and do their commercial transaction. Now some of you who realize that you're about to spend, 80 more hours with me, you might think, well, that's not fair. How do they get to come here and do real estate without seeing Neil's face for the next 10 weeks? And I don't blame you for that. But the thing is, how do they learn the laws and rules? They have to have a cooperation agreement. Somebody here with a North Carolina broker license has to oversee them, has to sign up with the commission and say, yeah, I'll make sure they do it right, that they don't break North Carolina rules and laws. Does that make sense? So they've got to partner up and basically have a cooperation agreement with a North Carolina broker. And that North Carolina broker is responsible for the supervision of their activities. Let me pause for a second. Let you sink that in. And then point something out to you. Does this out-of-state commercial broker who wants to come here and do real estate in North Carolina on a limited fashion, do they have to have a brokerage cooperation agreement with a North Carolina broker in charge? Careful. This is where some might say, tricky test question. It's not a broker in charge. Doesn't have to be the BIC. It just has to be a commercial broker. Think about it this way. Let's see, like Century 21, well-known franchise. Let's say there's a firm in Charlotte, Century 21, and they have a commercial broker in that firm. And there is a broker in charge of the firm, but the commercial broker is just one of the, let's say, 70 brokers that work for them. And so this out-of-state real estate broker wants to come in and they say, hey, Century 21 commercial person, will you be responsible and supervise my activities and let me sign a brokerage cooperation agreement with you being the one making sure I follow the laws and rules? So it's not the BIC. They like to ask you that. And it's easy to mess that up and think, yeah, of course it would be the BIC. That just makes sense. No, you're not signing the brokerage cooperation agreement with the broker in charge. They're over the whole firm, that whole location, that office location. It's one of the brokers in that firm who happens to be a commercial broker. That's who the cooperation agreement's with. Does that make better sense? So that's all we need to spend amount of time on this topic. There's only, I think right now, as of the last June, I think it's this most recent June bulletin, it's 280, about 279 of these limited non-resident commercial broker licenses that have been issued. So it's not something that's super common. Here's the firm license that's required. I mentioned that a little bit ago. If you set up an entity, that entity will be known as an LLC, an LLP, an S corporation, or a C corporation. You'll be doing business as DBA, one of these things, right? Talk to your CPA as to which one you should pick. So that firm license is required if you set up an entity for your business. And that just means you're now paying $45 to renew the firm license and $45 to renew your human license. When is it required? Anytime you're doing real estate, just like a real estate license is required for you as a human. Because you have an entity, you're doing your business in the name of that entity, and so you're getting paid in the name of that entity, then you need to have a real estate license for that entity too. Whether you're listing properties, helping sellers sell them, whether you're helping people buy, leasing for them, being a property manager, renting, helping people find rentals, doing auctions, even just sending out referrals, connecting clients with brokers and getting paid a referral fee. Any of those things, just like you would as a human, if you're doing it in the name of an entity, you need a firm license. And it's just a matter of going to the Real Estate Commission website, finding the little firm license application form and filling it out online. What sorts of things do you not need a license for? So you might get to a point in your business where you're too busy to do the small stuff, right? If you think about it and you do the math, the average dollars per hour, even if you have to write several offers in order to win one, probably rock bottom is $50 an hour, but more like $100 to $200 plus. Some of you with eyes toward the luxury market, way more than that, but $100 an hour, should you be spending time making flyers or even making Facebook posts or doing anything that you could hire someone else to do for $20 an hour or $15 or $10? Once you have enough money to pay someone else to do stuff, you should be delegating those things. The old saying is this: if you don't have an assistant, you are the assistant. You're doing all that stuff. So in the beginning, you've got to do all of it because you don't have maybe the available funds to hire some of this stuff out. But like if you just get a new listing and you need to enter that listing into the MLS, it's probably going to take an hour between putting all the data in there. What kind of water heater, electric or gas? How many square feet? Oh, I got to get the measurement. I measured it. I need to look at my sketch and calculate the square feet. That's going to take 20 minutes. Or I got to get it from that person I hired to measure for me. Probably a better idea. And does it look right? Does it look like they did it right? And, I need to upload the pictures. I can upload as many as I think in our local MLS, 40 some pictures if we want to, plus a virtual tour if we want to do that, plus a video, plus write the description, like 400 character description about the property, brand new water heater in 2022 and brand new roof just this year, and it's backs up to woods, and all the stuff. It takes a minute, many of them. So should you hire that out? Yeah. You should be out having lunch with a potential client. If you've got enough business that fostering the relationships is taking your time, but also you got to do this stuff on the back, then you should always be in front of people trying to get more business while someone else does this stuff on the back. So can they? Yes. You can hire an unlicensed person to put your listing in the multiple listing service database for you. Should you double check with it and make sure they did it right? Sure. Absolutely. Because you're still responsible for it. Whatever you delegate, you're still responsible for. Should you be delivering a sign to the yard of that new listing you just got yesterday? Well, if you have no choice, then sure. But if you can, and you can pay an unlicensed person to do it, then let them do it, right? So if you're unlicensed, you can deliver things. You can put signs and lock boxes on doors. You can provide basic information over the phone. What if your unlicensed assistant is sitting in the office and someone calls the main number asking about your new listing? Can they give them any information about it? Yes, as long as they're just reading it off the data sheet. But if that person calling starts saying, well, oh, asking price is $600,000, would they take $550? I'm sorry, I can't give you any of that information. I'll need to let you talk to my broker boss. You can't talk about negotiation types of stuff when you don't have a license. That's what the license requires. It's required to have a license when you're talking negotiating related things. But yeah, they could read off the sheet and say it's listed at $600,000. It's 3,100 square feet. It's got 3-car garage. They can do that. They can schedule appointments, coordinate appointments. That could be for showing the property. It could also be for an inspector to get out there, take a look around once you get under contract. It could be a repair person. They can also, now here's where the words really matter, prepare pre-printed forms for licensees. What does that mean? We licensees subscribe and join the Realtor Association. It's really hard to do this business without becoming a realtor, because if the firm you join is a member of the Realtor Association, everyone in the firm has to be. Also, it's kind of linked to the MLS in a certain way. So another benefit of becoming a realtor is that the North Carolina Association of Realtors has partnered up with the North Carolina Bar Association, the attorneys, North Carolina Bar, and they have combined together written a bunch of forms that we're allowed to use. Here's what it looks like. There we go. So we've got the National Association of Realtors, NAR, for national. Then we've got the North Carolina Association of Realtors, and something for every other state too, right? There's a California Association of Realtors, etc. Then there's the local board. And for me, it's the Charlotte one. I belong to the Charlotte Association of Realtors. I think there's a Cabarrus one as well. I actually live in Cabarrus County. I could have chosen to join that one. So I just, ever since day one, I've always just joined the Charlotte one because it's bigger, and I'm not 100% Concord Cabarrus person. So you in Raleigh there's a Raleigh Association of Realtors. So whatever it is that the local board is, so 3. And so that big monster Realtor Association dues that I told you about last night is split up into these 3. Some goes toward each, right? So this one for the state, North Carolina Association of Realtors, they partnered with the NC Bar Association, the attorneys, to come up with all of the forms. They're pre-printed forms, and that's what we use to do pretty much all of our business. We don't only have to use those forms, though. Let me show you what that looks like. Here we go. When you're a realtor, you have access to the state realtor website. Let's see if it remembers my password, if I might have to remember it myself. That's the best part of my life is remembering the passwords that I forget. That is sarcasm. So your firm will probably have access to the forms and give you access to the forms, but you can always get it here too. And so, oops, that's not what I wanted. I was thinking, why is it taking so long? They've made all of these pre-printed forms, and here's what one looks like. The most common one that we use for making offers and contracts is this one, Form 2T. And by the way, every form has a sample version that just has the word sample on it. That way, you're not giving out a sample that somebody could actually use. because unless you're an actual realtor or an attorney, you're not allowed to use these forms. Only realtors and attorneys can use these forms. So if you ever give freebies out, like, hey, just so you can see what a contract looks like, let me give you a sample, it better have the word on it. You could write the word, or you can just use the pretty version. So here it is, the most commonly used offer to purchase and contract we use. It's 15 pages currently. It's got a lot of blue boxes and red boxes, mostly blue, that kind of tell us how to fill out the form. And this is a typical pre-printed form. There's also one for property management. There's a whole bunch for that. There's addenda and amendments that might go along with this, because you need an FHA addendum because the person's getting an FHA loan. So there's certain protections you need to add into the transaction with that. And so what are we allowed to do as brokers? All we're allowed to do is fill in the blanks. As a broker, we cannot write extra language out in the margins. That would be called drafting a contract and performing legal duties or law without a license. Not allowed. All we have authority to do is fill in the blanks. And we could hire our unlicensed assistant to fill in these blanks for us. What would the situation look like? You've shown 5 properties. Your buyer likes one of them. They're really excited. They want to make an offer. You get back in the car. You're going to meet back at the office conference room. You call your unlicensed assistant. You say, hey, they really like number 4 at this address. Go ahead and write up the offer for me. Start filling in the blanks for me. Make it for this price and these terms and blah, blah, blah. So when I get to the office, I can just get it from you, unlicensed assistant, and show it to the client and go over it with them. They're not able to explain it to the client for you, but your unlicensed assistant can fill in the blanks for you upon your direction. And then you will interface with the client related to this thing. So that's what they're allowed to do as an unlicensed assistant. What else? Showing rental properties. Okay, here's the big difference between property management and sales. When you're in property management, as 3 or 4 of you are talking about doing, you can have an unlicensed person working for you, and that unlicensed person can actually show your rental property for you. But if you have a listing for sale, listen to me, you cannot let your unlicensed person show that property for sale. They can't do it. They're not allowed to show for sale property listings. They are allowed to show for rent properties. Why? I guess the logic is it's much more likely that on a for sale property that the client might start talking about negotiating related topics. They might say, oh, they're asking $450. Would they take $440? And so an unlicensed person is not qualified to answer that. And so the commission says you're not even allowed to show for sale properties. But if they work for a broker who does property management and they're unlicensed, yes, they can show rental property. So they're allowed to do that as an unlicensed person if it's rental. And then look at the difference between this next one and the one before. Preparing pre-printed forms for licensees that we just talked about, or executing pre-printed leases for an employer. Executing means sign it on behalf of your boss. You turn it into an executed lease. One of you, I think, did leasing management, right? You did a lot of those, didn't you? Which one was that? Who did that? Just hold up a hand. Yeah, there you are. Yeah. 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 Right. Yep. Doesn't surprise me a bit. And that's good to hear. Good to know. So it is just the way it is, right? The commission says you have unlicensed people, you can let them show rental properties, but you can't let them show for sale properties. And then as that leasing agent, you are unlicensed, obviously, you can execute pre-printed leases on behalf of your employer. You can't execute pre-printed forms on a sale. All you can do there is prepare it and give it to your broker boss for them to execute it. But they can execute it. They can sign on behalf of the firm if it's like a listing agreement, for instance. So these are things that don't require a license. That's very testable. They like to test you on what unlicensed people are allowed to do. Who is they? They, the real estate commission. What does that mean? So the real estate commission is comprised of a whole bunch of people that are carrying out all of these various things. We've got people in the legal department answering questions about, did somebody break a law? What is the law? We've got people in the education department who make sure that we teachers teach correctly and make sure that you students get what you need from us, and that we tell you the topics and that we test you in the right way, and the sanctity of the test questions is not compromised. And then the ones who are actually holding the hearings when there's a disciplinary action is often who people think of when we say the term real estate commission. So think of it this way. There's a board of real estate commissioners, and on that board there are nine real estate commissioners. And then they have a whole building full of people that carry out their wishes. Maybe as many as 100 people. Not sure if they still have that many, but they did at one point. So they have all these people that are responsible for all the various things that need to go, that are involved. Who are those 9 commission members? They serve 3-year terms. They roll off after 3 years, right? The 7 of them are appointed by the governor that's sitting in the moment. So when a new commissioner, a real estate commissioner is done with their 3 years, whoever's the governor replaces them, decides who to put back in that seat. If with this little caveat, 7 of them are appointed by the governor. 1 of them is appointed by the North Carolina Speaker of the House, and 1 of them is appointed by the North Carolina Senate President. So House versus Senate, they each get to pick 1, and the governor gets to pick 7. Notice I didn't say the word voted. The non-real estate commissioners are not voted in. They're appointed. They also do it for free. This is a sort of an honorary position. They're not paid. They are reimbursed for travel and meals, because for 2 days out of the month, they have to do this job. They have to go and meet in person and hold these hearings for people with complaints and decide the disciplinary action and decide the direction. Like back in COVID, they had to decide things like, well, how are we going to let the schools handle classes? Are they going to be able to, because before COVID, you really didn't see much Zoom classwork going on. But the commission said for one thing, they had to decide that year, 2020, you know what? It's too much going on right now. Let's relax the June 10th deadline for CE. They pushed it, I think, all the way to October that year. And it was for them to make that decision. So the 9 commissioners handle these types of things that might come up. Here's the other thing. These 9 commissioners are the ones making decisions about how we do real estate. Who are they protecting? Who's the real estate commission designed to protect? You can tell me in the chat. You got it. Not us, the consumer. Yeah. And so do we need to make sure that the 9 people on this commission board are not like predisposed to rule in favor of brokers? So would it only make sense that some of those real estate commission members are not real estate licensees? So at least 2 of them at any given moment cannot be licensees, cannot be in real estate at all. And then at least 3, of course, have to be licensed brokers. It's usually, I would imagine, more licensed brokers than not. Let me point something out here. Okay, good. Looking for the actual commissioners. Here it is. So if we go back over to the Real Estate Commission website, here they are. And let's see who it is. We've got Mel Black. He's the chairman. And look, he's an attorney. So he's one of the at least 2 non-real estate license holders. We've got Jeff. He's also an attorney. Well, there's 2. We got our 2. There might be more attorneys that are not real estate license holders. Now we've got Wendell. He's a property manager. So he's one of our 3 minimum real estate license holders. Cindy Chandler, she actually is the one who taught me pre-licensing 27 years ago. She's going strong. She still teaches. She's always been in commercial real estate. She's a super successful commercial broker. We've got TR Lawing. Anybody ever rented a place from TR Lawing? Their property management company. So he's another one with a real estate license. We've got Doug Fox, another attorney. So now we've got 3 attorneys. We only needed 2, but we got 3 non-real estate license holders at this point currently. We've got Anthony Lindsay, another realtor. We've got Jocelyn Millette, another attorney. So it's almost an even split at the moment, it looks like. And then finally, Sandra O'Connor, another broker. I think we might have 1 or 2 more real estate license holders than we do non at this current moment. But that could change. Again, at least 3 that have a license, at least 2 that are not in real estate. And then there's 9 total, 7 of the 9 appointed by the governor. So let's say Jeff here was appointed by the North Carolina House, and Jeff's 3 years is up. We need a new person in his place. So that means the House needs to pick one. The governor doesn't get to pick the replacement because the House needs to have one that they have picked. Does that make sense? So 7 appointed by the governor, 1 by the North Carolina House, 1 by the North Carolina Senate. And there they are. That's who's going to be staring down at you if you have to appear because of a big brown envelope letter of inquiry situation. It might be that you're just in the periphery. You were just kind of along. You didn't do anything wrong and they don't think you did, but you have something they need to know about. So you need to appear and speak as to that transaction and what you might have witnessed that the person that is under investigation had to do. So there they are. If you click on About Us at the Real Estate Commission website, you can see all the various things. There's the annual report, by the way, about the money. Looks like as of June 30th, supervised licensees, 127,000 people who applied, 9,800. It's kind of interesting. Got some failure rates, people who were denied, perhaps. All of this is public information. Oh, I went past the break. Okay, I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. seconds. Finish up our last 45 minutes. Almost done. Okay, talked about our real estate commission. Let me point something out to you. Let's see, where'd that go? Also on the real estate commission website, if you look under the About Us section where it says, I think it was missions and goals, you can kind of see to protect the public interest. I find that it's more helpful to remember things when you actually see the source, right? Protect the public interest in brokerage transactions. Ensure that applicants are competent. That's you. Make sure that you learn what you need to know and you possess the requisite character and fitness to act as brokers. To administer, monitor, and improve the quality of education, examination, and post-licensing education too. Make sure that licensees comply with law and rule. Investigate complaints, timely manner. Manage the cases, disciplinary cases in a timely manner, and serve as an information resource for you guys, for us. Special problems in areas of concern, positions and rules and proposed legislation to address problems. Disseminate, hand out things subject of special interest and concern, and then employ and manage and train staff to conduct the business of the commission. So there it is. All of that pretty much means the consumer comes first. Let's see. What does the commission do? We just kind of saw that. They protect the public. They educate you guys and us. They issue the licenses. They register timeshare projects. To be a timeshare, you got to be involved with the real estate commission. You got to apply. They grant you that timeshare. You register it with them. They establish the education requirements that you're going through right now and that you'll go through with post and then with CE. They investigate complaints and then they discipline us. Which way, what do they not do to licensees when it comes to discipline? Tell me in the chat. You got it. They can do these 4 things, but they do not fine unless you're a timeshare developer, in which case they would fine you $500 per violation. But most of the disciplinary they will do to us is these 4 things. Reprimand and censure, kind of the same thing. You would get a reprimand before you would get a censure, but they're basically both a note in the file, slap on the hand. More serious, a suspension. The most serious, a revocation. Your license is revoked, can't do this anymore. The suspension gets interesting because if you might have noticed in some of that disciplinary stuff we saw yesterday, they do give sometimes conditions related to the suspension. They'll say you're suspended, but you're only going to be suspended for the first month. Or no, we're going to stay the suspension. You don't have to actually stop doing real estate, but if you don't fulfill the conditions we give you, like taking some extra classes to get refreshed on whatever it is you did wrong, then you're going to have to sit the bench and not do real estate. So they might stay the suspension or attach some certain conditions to it. What do you have to get your license? Well, you do not need a high school diploma. Some people think you do. You just have to be 18, have a social security number, have a work permit, or be a U.S. citizen or a qualified alien, pass this course, pass the PSI exam that this course gives you clearance to take, which includes both a national and a state section, and then submit your background report and requisite character study. We talked about all that last night. So you're in a 75 plus hour course. We do an 85 hour course for pre-licensing. You're also going to take 3 30-hour courses within 18 months. And that's what it takes to get in and get past your provisional license. And then forever and ever having a license, every broker who wants to have active status needs to take the CE classes by June 10th. 8 total hours, 2 4-hour classes, an update and an elective of your choice. So here's another good testable item that people, last slide. Was it this one? Who's asking? There you are. Or this one? Oh, by the way, I will give you these slides if that helps any. I meant to tell you that. So I'm going to, and feel free to have me stop to do screen captures, to take notes. I don't mind that a bit. So keep asking that if you need that. But I will also be posting these to the Google Drive in its own little folder within there. And so after tonight, I'll post this one, and I'll work on posting them all along the way. Is that good? Okay, good. So here's the thing. You're going to have to take post-licensing. You're also going to have to take continuing ed. Neither one of them counts as hours toward the other one. They are independent of each other. In other words, you might get a little tired after taking 90 hours of post-licensing, and you might have the thought occur to you, wouldn't it be nice if some of these 90 hours count toward my CE requirement? But it doesn't. Sorry to say. They don't let it cross over. The post-licensing is its own 3 30-hour courses that do not count toward your CE and vice versa. When is that post-licensing due, by the way? 18 months from when? Tell me in the chat. $18 months from when? I'll give you two choices. When you first get your license or when you activate your license. Which one is it? Do your 3 30-hour post classes within 18 months of license or activation of the license. You guys are good. First two, good job. It's the license, period. Don't worry about the active. The activation is irrelevant. It's from issuance of the license. Now the 18-month clock is ticking. This might be a way you can remember that. Occasionally in a post-licensing class, I have inactive licensees because they chose not to even affiliate with a broker yet until they finish all their posts. They just wanted to do that. They don't have to. They could also have affiliated and been making money working on the business while still trying to fit in the classes. So you could do either one. But so that 18 months starts ticking as soon as you get your license given to you, even when it's an inactive status license. What else? So the inactivity is all about education. Either you didn't do your post within 18 months of issuance of license, or you didn't do your continuing education by June 10th in a given year. Those 2 4-hour classes. Here's some good news for you. As a brand newly licensed person, when you get your provisional license, what are you going to be good on? What are you going to know? Probably better than some 5, 10, 15, 20-year veteran agents. The newest laws and rules. I usually tell brand new agents, take pride in the fact that you know the laws and rules better than everybody else, because you probably do. Some of those 13-year veteran agents are pretty rusty and are making terrible mistakes along the way. They just haven't gotten caught yet. So it's not an insignificant thing that you know the latest laws and rules. Some people don't stay up on those things as they should. We're seeing a lot of misbehavior out there. So as a brand newly licensed broker, you don't have to take CE the first June 10th deadline. You get to skip your first June 10th. That's the way I like to say it. I don't like it when people say you get to skip your first year, because it might not be an entire year that you're skipping. Let's say, what are we on? We're in June, so it doesn't apply. Let's say that we did all this class and we finished the class in May, this past May. And what, we had like 40 days to go before June 10th? If you finish the class on May 1st, you got your license. Let's just say that. You got your real estate license on May 1st. Would you have needed to also get 8 hours of CE done by June 10th? No, because you know everything. There's nothing you would have learned. You would have learned everything most recently, so that would be silly. So you would have gotten to skip this June 10th, and then, yes, you will need to take your CE before next June 10th. But in your case, that's not what's happening. In your case, what is it? It's like we go out to September 6th, I believe, end of the course exam. So you could conceivably take your PSI, let's see, September, like you could be done with a license in hand in October. And so which June 10th do you get to skip? You don't need to worry about fitting CE in between October and June 10th of 2024. In fact, you get to go a whole year and what is that? October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, like a year and 9 months or 6 months or however many my fingers added up to just now that I can't do math at 8:56 p.m. apparently. So you get to skip CE for your first June 10th. Once you get your license this coming October, you don't have to cram in another 8 hours of education for CE for the very next June 10th we're going to get to. But you will have to have it done for the following June 10th. Does that make sense? And then expired license means you didn't pay your money, like a parking meter. You don't pay the $45 by June 30th, then your license, it goes expired. If you don't do the education by June 10th, your license goes inactive. They like to test you the difference between inactive versus expired. And don't forget, BICs have to have an extra careful relationship with their PBs or their provisional broker. I'll call them PBs from time to time. Got to be more supervision going on. They're accountable for the provisional broker's actions. They have to supervise them better. Let's talk about some level 3 material. We're going to touch on some prohibited acts. We'll get it more into that when we come back to license law and commission rule. Here's a big one. In fact, material facts. What is it? Anybody tell me in the chat. What do I mean about a material fact? Let me take the answer off and just give you a little bit of a pop quiz here. Tell me in the chat just give me an example of a material fact about a property, for instance. What's a material fact? Something that you have to disclose. So let me refine the question a little bit. A material fact is something that, first of all, brokers have to disclose all material facts that we know about. We can never hide them from anybody. Brokers cannot hide material facts if we know about them. Even if it's if our client is the seller and the roof leaks and the seller tells us, don't tell anybody about the roof leaks. It only leaks when it rains more than like 2 days in a row. That would be an illegal request we cannot comply with. We have to disclose it if we know it. That's how important material facts are. There we go. Basement flooding, lot size, mold in the property. Now, square footage is an interesting one. As far as the real estate commission is concerned, do we have to disclose the square footage of a property? No, we don't. The commission doesn't care. All the commission cares about is that if you do disclose the square feet, you give the right number. You give the accurate number. But something else in our industry does require that we disclose square feet, and that is the multiple listing service. And since we can't put a listing in the MLS without putting in the square feet, the commission says, well, then make sure you put the accurate square footage. So does the commission say that square footage is a material fact? No, they don't. But does the commission say that an error in the square footage is a material fact? Come to find out, you're wrong by 200 square feet. Yes, then an error in square feet would be a material fact problem. That's a great one. Bryant mentioned something that's kind of advanced. The average licensee or pre-licensee student wouldn't really think about. public or privately maintained road. The house is located on a road that is privately maintained, meaning the state of North Carolina doesn't maintain it. DOT for North Carolina doesn't agree to keep it paved, to keep it in good repair. My brother-in-law sold a house, thankfully using me, and he was on the street like a gravel road. He owned a house along with, I think there were probably 12 houses on that road, and it was gravel. The pavement ran out. And from 100 feet before his house, all the way the rest of the way down, 10 or 12 of he and his neighbors, they had to make sure it stayed in decent repair because the state didn't have anything to do with it. It had never been dedicated to public maintenance. And you better believe that's a huge one. Is the road the house is on publicly maintained or private? Because that's expensive. Having roads paved, potholes fixed is super expensive. What else? What are material facts? There are 4 categories. Everybody thinks of the leaky roof and the mold because that's about the house itself. But keep in mind, what is a material fact? It's something that is either about the property, but it also could be related to the property. Here in Concord, I'm living in Concord. I'm sitting in a house right now just to the east of Charlotte. Anybody happen to know what major tourist attraction event took place about a month ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago here in Concord? The big race, the Coca-Cola 600, you got it. So there's a speedway. Guess what? If I sold a house, as I have, to buyers near my house, I should have and did tell them that it's going to get noisy around here a couple times a year. There's also the Z-Max drag strip. That gets noisy a few times a year. There's an entire neighborhood that overlooks it, sort of like a cathedral seating, the way the ground kind of lies. They're all just kind of looking over. There it is. And that there's no tree screen, and that's loud. I had a coffee shop buddy that I hang out with at the coffee shop, and he actually burst a vessel in his eyeball because he stood too close at the drag strip. The concussion of the force of that car just boom, shook his eye so hard that he ended up bursting a vessel. So you imagine it's noisy. And then there's something else on the other side of the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Does anybody know the major business operation that serves 7 counties that has been around at least since I've been here, since 1980 and longer, that's right next to the Speedway? Not very luxurious, not a very sexy kind of business. The furthest thing from it, in fact. Any guesses? Major operation that they're doing with the land behind the Speedway. It is now built up to where I can see it from the end of my road. And you bet Will says it's the landfill. I can look out about 2 miles away because of the way the land lays, and there it is, little Tonka trucks driving on the top in the distance. So there's some neighborhoods over there on the other side. Anywhere from $400,000 to $900,000 houses I could sell to somebody in smelling distance of the landfill. Thankfully, I've heard it doesn't smell that much that often. Occasionally, I'll see in the Harrisburg Facebook group forum or page that somebody might complain, but usually they keep it in check. It's a very advanced scientific operation. They keep it buried. They put plastic over it, but it's there. And you better believe, as a broker, I have to disclose it. It's a material fact. It's not on the property itself, but it's down the road, so it matters. And we also have the Concord Regional Airport. There's some houses and neighborhoods that are under a flight pattern, right? It's not as busy as Charlotte, but during the race it can be, and those are big jets. And then North Charlotte, anybody familiar with Highland Creek or Skybrook in Charlotte? Those neighborhoods are across Eastfield Road from what I affectionately call the poop farm. Wallace Farm has little miniature horses that do what horses do, and they make great, very rich, dark soil that has lots of nutrients and grows delicious tomatoes, but it comes at a cost of doing what farm animals do, right? So if you list a $900,000 house in Skybrook, did you put in the remarks section that it's down the street, across the street from the Wallace Farm, which might smell a little earthy, farmy, a couple times a year maybe? I listed one in Skybrook, and nobody else No other listing agent mentioned it but me. It's a material fact that's related to the property under number 2 here, right? It could also be zoning. That's a material fact. What can you do with the property? Also, covenants and restrictions for the neighborhood. There might be neighborhood restrictions. You're not allowed to paint the door purple. You can't have a fence taller than 6 feet. Can't have it made out of chain link. It's got to be either metal pickets or maybe like a privacy type of fence, something like that. If you ever go down through a neighborhood and see fences that match, it's probably because they have covenants and restrictions that require that the fences are made out of a certain small selection of material. Number 3 gets interesting, which is a material fact that the principal to the transaction, meaning the buyer or the seller, that something has happened to their financial ability and it has jeopardized the ability to complete the transaction. In other words, the buyer's loan didn't get approved. Now they can't buy it. Can we find a lender that will? Maybe, maybe not. But the minute you find out that your buyer's loan didn't get approved, you better tell that other side. If you're the buyer agent, you better call that listing agent and say, hey, got some bad news. The buyer's loan was denied. A lot of times you can work that out. You can actually fix it. So it's not dead necessarily. What about on the seller side? Any guesses what sorts of financial problems could arise for the seller that would keep them from performing and being able to complete the transaction? It's a pretty good guess. Divorce, maybe. Liens, for sure. Liens could be a big problem. The appraisal, yeah, that could, that certainly, if it doesn't appraise for the full value, then yeah, might not be able to work that out. It might just go away. Kirsty makes a great point, but it turns out, interestingly, we'll learn more about this in chapter 9 and 10. If the seller dies, we still have a deal. That does not kill the contract. The seller dies, the estate of the seller, the heirs of the seller could still perform. And the buyer doesn't just have to lose the property. It's up to the buyer. Do they still want to buy it? Yeah, the heirs and estates. I had that happen about a week before a closing one time. My little first-time buyer, the seller had a heart attack, fell off the lawnmower in the front yard and died a week before closing. So I found out from the listing agent, told my buyer, and he's like, what do we do? And I said, we just got to sit back and wait. Obviously, out of sensitivity and courtesy, just to let them handle their business of getting this person squared away. But then they still want to sell it. They can still close on it. We were delayed by like 2 weeks while they got their stuff together, got the funeral done, and blah, blah, blah. So there's a difference between what kills a transaction, whether it's in a under contract phase or just the offer phase. Well, that's what we'll get into in chapters 9 and 10. If we just had an offer on the table and the seller died, then that would kill the offer, but not if it's a contract. We'll get into that later. But another one, yeah, liens could. Also, what if the seller declares bankruptcy? What if the seller gets a foreclosure letter in the mail? Because come to find out, they haven't paid for 4 months in a row. They hadn't made their house payment. If they don't make their house payment, is that a material fact? No, that is not a material fact. The idea here is they could make it up. They could win the lottery. A relative could help. It's not like a clock ticking to the same degree. But if they don't make their house payment to the point where the foreclosure process begins, they get a letter in the mail. Now, yeah, that is a material fact. So that's testable. Keep that in mind. If they get the foreclosure letter, hey, just warning you, we're your lender. We're letting you know you haven't paid in the last X number of months. Therefore, we're starting the foreclosure proceedings. That is a material fact that would have to be disclosed to all parties, because it certainly affects, can you get it closed before the foreclosure happens? Maybe, maybe not. Frankly, you probably could. And in a market like this, the values are high enough that you could probably sell it, succeed and successfully close, and have enough money to pay the seller's lender everything that they are owed. penalties included. So probably less of an issue as it would have been back in 2008 when the values weren't high enough. Back then, the properties weren't worth what they were owed. People might have a $300,000 mortgage loan balance, but the house is only worth $250,000. And that's when we get into alternate forms like a short sale. We'll learn about short sales in chapter 14 and 15. What else? One time in 2010, my seller that I had a listing for, the seller said, I just want to ride off in the sunset in my new RV trailer pulled behind my new pickup truck, dually pickup truck. Notable, commendable goal, right? He's a retiree. He wanted to just ride off and travel the country. And I said, okay, fine. By the way, it's 2010. I just have to tell you, a lot of times back in 2008 through 10, 12, we had to give sellers bad news. And we'll do a net sheet and say, hey, seller, here's how much you can walk away with if you sell your property. Back then, though, we were telling them, here's how much you're going to have to bring to the closing table and write a check for in order to sell your property, because you're basically upside down. You owe more than what we can get for it. And I had that news for him, but it wasn't that bad compared to some. I had to say, looks like you might need to maybe bring $1,000. Is that okay? Or do we need to do a short sale? Where a short sale is where he would say to his lender, hey, lender, I know I owe $250, but I can't sell it for that much. Can I pay you less than what I owe you? I owe you $250, but can I give you $230 or whatever? The lender would have to take their time. They take a lot of time and decide this. Short sale does not mean fast. It means you're giving the lender short of what you owe them. So I asked him, do you need to do a short sale? Are you in a financial hardship, or do you have $1,000 extra bucks to bring to closing if you need to sell your house? And he said, that's fine. I can pay the $1,000. I just want to get out of this house so I can drive across the country. 5 months later, because back then it took that long to get offers, we had an offer, and we worked it all out over the phone. And so I went over to his house to get it signed. We had worked it out verbally, and he pointed to the table to an envelope, and he said, I want to do that. And on that envelope, it said Bank of America short sale package. And I said, we talked about this 5 months ago. Remember, I said, do you want to do a short sale? And you said no, that you had the $1,000 or $2 if you needed it. And he said, well, I don't care. I'm going to do it. I want to do that. And I said, well, here's the problem. That was a material fact that we should have disclosed all this whole time. If you wanted to pursue a short sale, that would have been a material fact. And I needed to tell everyone, because now I'm going to have to tell this buyer's agent, and they're going to tell their buyer. And I'm going to make a guess that buyer's not going to be interested in buying your property. Because here's how short sales work. It takes months and months to get approval from the seller's lender to allow it. And even then, they might not allow it. How many buyers want to hang in there and put their plans on hold, waiting for a seller's lender to maybe say, no, you've wasted your time? In this case, that buyer ran for the hills. They said, that's ridiculous. And their agent ripped me a new one, said, you should have disclosed that. That was a material fact, and I had to take it. Sometimes you got to take the beating. And I had to say, you're right. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I would have told if I knew. The next conversation I had with him was worse. I called him and I said, okay, well, let's put it back on the market. Now we'll have to just tell the world that you want to pursue a short sale. And he said, well, I've been thinking and talking to an attorney, and I want to do something different. What kind of attorney would you like to guess he was talking to? And while you're putting that in the chat, I will tell you that I would pay that attorney like a couple $100 to take a class on salesmanship. Not really. But that attorney was so good that this bankruptcy attorney, good job, Deborah, had my guy so excited and happy of the prospect of declaring bankruptcy that he was just thrilled. He said, well, the guy says that I can walk away from my debt. I still get to keep the RV and the truck, which I wanted to do anyway, and I can just walk away from it all, including my 5 months of work, by the way. But nobody cared about that. So the seller declaring bankruptcy, or the buyer for that matter, is a material fact too. And then number 4 is the most interesting one, because it's pretty much a blank check. What is a material fact? Anything the client cares about. My second year in the business, I had my first pretty upper end listing at the time in 1997 $350,000 listing in Radburn, the north part of Charlotte. Nice house, nice neighborhood. Nothing around really like it. Highland Creek was coming along, but it was still kind of in the preschool stages. So this neighborhood, Radburn, this house, 350, had a buyer. Pretty short time frame. They came along and they made an offer and we got accepted. And so they sent their inspector out. And the inspector went into the crawl space, as they do, and they saw a little bit of termite damage on one of the floor joists under the crawl space. It was like one termite came up out of the ground, nibbled 3 little bite marks and went away. And that was it. In fact, if that seller had some sandpaper, they could have removed the evidence and nobody would have known the difference. That's how little there was. I'm not saying they should have, but that's how little bit of surface damage there was. But for this buyer, they had come from Florida. Anybody familiar with Florida and its termites? They are bigger than ours. We have termites. We have a pretty big termite issue, but we know how to handle it. It's really not that big a deal. You just treat it. You squirt the poison around the house and they guarantee it and keep it up. You can put a bond on it and have them check every year. In Florida, they're bigger. And these folks in particular had lost a lot of money because of a termite damage issue. And so that became a thing for them. When they came to Charlotte and talked to their buyer agent, they said, all we can tell you is we don't want to deal with any termite houses. If a house has even been burped on by a termite, we're not interested. And so when it came out that we had 2 little nibble marks from one termite 3 years ago, they were gone because it mattered to them. Another one that could matter to the parties would be pet allergies. Anybody know of somebody with pet allergies? They can smell that a cat walked across the front yard 3 days ago. It's a curse, right? They're horribly sensitive to this. And so it might be important to them, and therefore that makes it a material fact. Where is it a material fact that the house had a cat? No. But if it matters to the client, it is. See the difference? So the reason I'm ready with all of these facts and stories about material facts is because this past year's CE class had an entire 2-hour portion dedicated just to material facts, because it turns out in 20 and 21, 47% of the disciplinary actions were because of material fact problems. Agents were doing it wrong to that level. We were bad at it, not disclosing it properly, not following up. So as brokers, yet again, we're putting the client first, even above ourselves. As brokers, we have a responsibility to disclose everything that we know about the property, things related to the property, the principal's ability to complete the transaction, and anything important to the parties involved. Buyer versus seller, for instance. That is the level of responsibility we have as brokers. So we have to disclose them. And if we don't disclose them, then we're guilty of some sort of misrepresentation or omission. So what do these things mean, misrepresentation versus omission? Misrepresentation means that you communicated something. Omission means that you should have, but you didn't. Basically. Remember your mom or dad said you lied by omission. You lied because you didn't say something. You should have spoken up. Well, don't think of it that way, because it's both wrong. I don't know how much that helps us here, but misrepresentation, you're going to have to read a test, like a paragraph on the test question. They're going to paint this story. You're going to have to recognize, what did the agent do wrong, if anything? Or did they misrepresent, or did they omit? And so what I find is that it's easier to, let's look at this one. Here's the way the 4 possibilities look. It's easier to figure out the second half of that first. Was it willful misrepresentation or negligent? Well, first of all, let's figure out, did they say something by misrepresenting, or did they omit? Meaning they just kept their mouth shut, but they should have said something. So figure out the omit versus misrepresent thing first. Then figure out, did they do it on purpose, willfully, or did they do it because they were slack or lazy, negligently, right? So now let's go back. Misrepresentation means the agent said something or communicated something or wrote it. Said that the one thing that popped up in the bulletin this month was the agent, I think I might have mentioned to you, said that it had high-speed internet in the listing, but it didn't. And so they misrepresent it because they put in their advertising on the MLS and probably other advertising. This property has high-speed internet. They did not omit something. They misrepresented it. Now, the question that had to be asked during the investigation is, did they do it because they didn't bother to check? They didn't call to see for sure, is there a company that offers high speed? If that's what happened, then they're guilty of what? Negligent or willful misrepresentation? Which one was it if they didn't bother to check? Yeah, they were lazy. That's negligence. But what if they did check and they knew for a fact that it did not have high-speed internet and they just went ahead and said that it did? Now we're talking willful, which is even is a lot dumber, right? Because it's easy to check. I have a feeling it was negligent misrepresentation. I don't know if they mentioned it in that case. We can go back and look, but probably negligent misrepresentation. We do know it was misrepresentation because they communicated to everyone that it was high-speed and it had high-speed internet. If it's willful misrepresentation, then they knew about it and they lied. If it's negligent misrepresentation, they should have known about it or should have found out, because one of our agency requirements is that we have reasonable skill and care. It's what we do know that we need to communicate. It's also what we should be expected to know as a reasonably prudent broker. That's an important phrase they look at when they're doing their investigation. So it's these combinations. Willful misrepresentation, you lied. Negligent, you gave incorrect information that you should have caught and checked. Or willful omission, you knew about it but failed to disclose. I hope they don't ask because I know that it's this other bad thing, and so I'm not going to say. And then negligent omission, they never even bothered to find out. I gotcha. I saw that. I'll talk about that in just a second. What else? Yeah, go ahead. Go for it. Oh, out of these, that's a good question. As far as willful versus negligent, I have a feeling negligent happens more because I would like to think that agents are more lazy than they are just mean. And, neither one is good, but I have a feeling they go too quickly. They cut corners, and the negligence probably pops up more than just telling a lie willfully. The misrepresentation versus omission, I bet that's an even split, because sometimes they might just not bother to check and verify that it's zoned for some use that's allowable, for instance, or they don't even bother to bring it up. Maybe somebody wants to run a dog kennel facility as a business and they don't even bother to mention covenants and restrictions that might not allow it. They don't know for sure that it's against the covenants and restrictions, but they don't even mention that the neighborhood has rules that have to be followed. So that would be omission, right? So yeah, I bet it's pretty even split between those two. Good question. We're going to talk more about just these. These are additional things we're not allowed to do. I would give you some homework and say, read the comment section, the first 4 or 5 pages. Well, let's go through the first 5 pages and get to this point where it talks about discriminatory practice, improper commissions, and false promises. Page 4, I think 3 and 4 go into these 4 possibilities, and they've got like 4 or 5 examples of each of these 4 things. So get good with those. Maybe even do this. Here's some homework. Make up your own version of each of these, like a scenario, like willful misrepresentation. Think, what's a case where an agent might tell the wrong information on purpose, just flat out lie, and write a little scenario of that. Pick one of the 4, or do one for each if you want to, but at least pick one of the 4 and write the scenario, and then leave out what it is. Don't tell us what it is in the scenario, so that we can I'll give it to each of you as sort of a in-class thing. Say, hey, tell me about this situation. What do you think it is? That makes sense? Let me see. I got a comment here. Let's see, making sure following the study guide correctly. Where in the book did we discuss today? Okay, so you can be prepared. Chapter section cover next. That's pretty similar. That's good. Two questions unrelated that are different people asking the same. Let me show you. Here we go. Oh. So, yeah, let's just go back to the syllabus. We're going to finish the rest of this little first couple sections of the license law commission rule. We'll finish that next week. And then we'll get on into chapter 1. So definitely be ready for next week with, you see how chapter 1, which is also syllabus section 1, is like 45 minutes, 0.75 of an hour or 45 minutes. So we'll do that pretty quickly. Then we'll spend the rest of our time on Wednesday, 4.5 hours. Is that right? Let me see. Nope, sorry. Wednesday we don't have class, but Thursday we do. That's right. And that makes sense now. So Wednesday we don't have class. I'll just see you once next week. I've got to take a class next week so that I'm authorized to teach continuing ed, and that overlaps with this class. So I wasn't able to do this class. So Thursday, the 29th, we will cover chapters 1 and 2 and the rest of this willful, negligent, omission, misrepresentation stuff. Does that help? I'm looking at faces. Okay, good. And then for the 5, let's go through 5. That'll be good. And we'll pick a couple examples and talk about willful and negligent omission and misrepresentation together first on next Thursday too. Let's see, where else? What else? So comment section through page 5, there's that. The Relink book, make sure that you're familiar with the process there, and just keep in mind this chart is going to be handy when we get to review time. And then as you're looking through the comments section and you see references to license law or commission rule, and more like when you read through the syllabus and click on those links, you'll either go to the license law content or the commission rule content. So I'll make sure these are added. I don't remember if they are, but I'll make sure they are tonight. If you need something, let me know. And those who ask for emails to be resent, let me know if you actually got them. What else? I think that's it. Just reach out to me, check in on Notion. Be sure that you join that if you haven't already, so that I can make sure you have access and you can see these various assignments and tutorials that I'll be posting along the way, because it's an important resource too. Other than that, I wish you the very best. Enjoy your extra 2 minutes. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. You're welcome. Take care.